across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Well, thank you to Juliet, by the way. Welcome to the home of common sense. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. We've got a lot to get through. As you can imagine, we will pick up the baton of that curious story of the Palestinian migrants who applied through a scheme meant for Ukrainian refugees who've been given the right to live in the United Kingdom. I mean, in the big book of This World Has Gone Bonkers, it's upside down, black is white, night is day. I mean, this one gets chapter 1, right? You couldn't make this stuff up. We'll have more on that in a few moments. Also, rule changes now give drivers more time to pay parking tickets after one woman was fined nearly £2,000 when poor phone signals prevented her from paying for her ticket. This is a common story. We'll speak to the woman concerned. And of course, I'm sure you have your own experiences of this as well. And children who identify as animals and walk on all fours should be shown empathy, according to Home Office funded guidance. If your kid walks on all fours, I'm sorry, you don't need empathy, you need a doctor, right? Okay, you probably need a psychiatrist. Yeah, I mean, understand that maybe something's gone wrong with little Joey. Maybe little Joey identifies as a little Joey. Perhaps that is the case. If that is, then believe me, you need a child psychiatrist. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Lots to get through. Look, I can't put this question in any other way, really. Should there be a total ban on refugees from Gaza? Now, we phrase that question deliberately to acknowledge there will be refugees. I'm not stupid. I'm not a half-wit. It's quite clear that lots of people in Gaza displaced because of what has happened to their brutal death cult of a government will be displaced. It will be a horrendous time, and most of those people will not be terrorists. However, do you know which ones are and which ones aren't? Do you know which ones have empathy with the Hamas regime? Do you know which ones would endorse and rubber stamp an act of terrorism in the name of their God, their land, or whatever it might be? No, neither do I, neither does the Home Office, and frankly, neither does Judge Hugo Norton-Taylor, for it is he who decided that this should be given the green light. Look, sometimes you have to draw a line called common sense. Palestinian migrants have been granted the right to live in the UK. I'll say that sentence again. If you've only just caught up with this story, it's the first time of hearing it. Palestinian migrants have been granted the right to live in the UK. Now, that in itself would be disturbing. Not because we don't want no Palestinians here. It ain't that. This is common sense. This is logic. This is uncharted territory. This is stupid. However, they applied through a scheme that was meant for Ukrainian refugees. So this is a family of 6 people. They will be allowed to join their brother in Britain after an immigration judge ruled the Home Office's rejection of their application. You're ahead of me here. Are you ready? Shall we say it all in unison? Their rejection of their application breached their human rights. Yes, that's what happened. So they made the application through the scheme that was meant for Ukrainians, of course, and we know why that was in place, and we understood what the deal was. The decision to accept their case came despite warnings by lawyers for the Home Office that it could open the floodgates to the, quote, admission of all those in conflict zones with family in the UK. You don't have to be right, you don't have to be the Home Secretary. You don't have to be an immigration lawyer. You don't have to be even a cursory expert at some of this kind of stuff. You don't even have to be political of any persuasion. To be able to reasonably extrapolate from this story, from the headline, this is probably a very silly idea. A very silly idea indeed. The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, said the case showed that changes to human rights laws were needed so that Parliament, not judges, controlled who settled in the UK. Now, the Tories can say that till they're blue in the face. I'm sorry. They have no right, no track record on this one. In fact, if you want to look at the judge concerned, Hugo Norton-Taylor, he's the upper tribunal judge. He overturned the Home Office's decision and granted the Palestinians appeal, allowing them to come to the UK on the basis of their Article 8 right to a family life under the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR. That delicious acronym that has caused so much jip. So frankly, the Tories can keep stum on this. They've got no right, no track record. This is the same judge, by the way, who's previously greenlit a rapist to stay in the country, because sending him back to Afghanistan or something would have been a terrible thing, because the Taliban didn't like that kind of stuff. Like we're okay with it. Yeah, we're fine with a rapist. He's good as gold, is he? Robert, he's fine. He doesn't, you know, he doesn't mean no harm. He's just an occasional rapist. But don't send him anywhere where the regime might not like him, because that would be a breach of his, here we go again, his human rights. I mean, you cannot make this shizzle up. This is nonsense territory. It's beyond nonsense. It's kind of a sort of black mirror. It's like somebody somewhere is sitting in a big room taking the piddle out of all of us. Go, I know what we'll do. Let's find the worst offender you can think of and we'll let them stay here. We had the chicken nugget story the other day, the paedophile that couldn't be deported because he had kids, and therefore it'd be bad for his family life, even though he doesn't live with the kids, and frankly shouldn't be anywhere near kids, even if they're his own. I mean, it's all of these decisions, and you look at them, you can look at them in isolation, frankly, and say, well, that's a bit weird, right? That's a bit strange. You can stay in here. Now, you know, philosophers, I use that word with tongue-in-cheek, philosophers of human rights laws will go, no, you've got to look at this in a very different way. You've got to say, well, look, the judge is only upholding the law. The judge is not an activist. Do you know what? I'm not so sure about that. I think quite a lot of judges are activists. They have their own views on certain things. The fact you gravitate into this area of law, I would suggest, means you have a certain level of interest in it, and that interest on balance is likely to be sympathetic to cases where the rest of the world say this is bonkers. That's what I think is going on here. So the ECHR, Tories, Chris Philp, you know, with respect, mate, you can say whatever you like, but your government also oversaw many of these kind of cases, and frankly, if you were elected tomorrow, you've got no desires to leave the ECHR, it would continue. And I come back to that comparison I seem to be giving every single day at the moment, that of, you know, why did people vote for Donald Trump? It's because of nonsense like this. It's exactly because of nonsense like this. When we don't have a leader, a politician, that can stand up and say, sorry, enough is enough. Some decisions don't need philosophers of immigration and the like to be able to look at the story and say, this is clearly stupid. I have no doubt this is a family that would mean no harm to anyone. There is such a thing as precedent, because the next judge will say, oh, yeah, we can do that. Because, look, if you look at this case of the Palestinian family versus UK government, you will find it clear-cut. So there is precedent. Ka-ching, there we go. Open the gates, green light is done, everything's sorted, in you come. I mean, it's stupid. This is a war zone. It's a war zone from one of the most tyrannical regimes on the planet, from one of the most dubious areas of the planet. It is stupid. It's counter to all logic and sense in any shape or form. So with that in mind, you might think everybody would agree with this, but of course there will be those that say, we need to help those in need. So should there be a total ban on refugees from Gaza? We didn't have that sense when we were talking about Hong Kong people escaping a tyrannical regime, nor did we have that same issue with Ukraine. But we are dealing with two different things here. Our lines are open, 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this. And the other big stories of the day, Robert Taylor, the journalist and political commentator, is back with us. Afternoon to you, Robert.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us as ever. This is a curious story. Worth having a listen first to Ben Habib. He was speaking to us earlier here on Talk, criticising, in fact, we'll have that clip in just a second. Ben Habib criticising Gaza protests in the UK as going against Britain. We'll come to that in a second because it does rather highlight quite nicely what we're talking about here. But what a curious story this is, Robert.
Well, it really is, isn't it? And as I understand it, the family concern from Gaza wanted to come under this Ukraine refugee scheme, which is clearly nonsense. I mean, it's for Ukrainians. It's not, that's what they, look at the name. But in fact, the judge has ruled that it is about the European Convention on Human Rights and Article 8, which is the right to a family
Yeah.
life. Well, this is completely balmy, obviously, Ian. I mean, there are about 1 billion people in the world in conflict zones. Now, of course, we feel for them. It's awful. But judging by what has happened in this judgment by Norton Taylor, they'll all have the right to come to the UK as long as they can prove they have a relative here.
Yeah.
It's clearly not going to work on any level.
And I mean, that in itself is a rather sort of bizarre criteria for acceptance. Well, you've got a relative here. I don't, you've got a brother or a cousin. I have no idea why that would be some relevant to the point of being given the green light. That's curious in itself. But the fact that somebody is coming from Gaza, it is not unreasonable, and we, forever self-flagellate on this stuff, Robert, and we, sort of have to put all these, I'm not a horrible person, but look, it's Gaza, okay? It's Gaza that's run by Hamas. They're at war. We don't know who is who. We have no idea. It is clearly a dangerous precedent to set.
It's a balmy precedent to set, and what I think this really shows, Ian, is that the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, has overreached dramatically. And what it shows more is that international refugee law is not fit for purpose. I think the UN Convention on Refugees dates from the early 50s. We were in a totally different world than we are now, where we've got millions of refugees, millions of asylum seekers seeking to get into Europe and then on, of course, to our shores. I don't think it's fit for purpose, and at some point is going to have to change.
I'm pretty sure if you said to those that were the architects of the ECHR and all the conventions and the rules, this country being one of the chiefs, Churchill and the like, all involved in this, and you'd given them this scenario back in the 50s, I don't think any of them would have said, yeah, it's meant for that. I think they would have said, no, that's not the purpose of what this bill or this ruling or this system is about. They would have refuted that. I don't believe for one second it was meant to deal with things like this.
And what I don't understand is why there isn't more urgency internationally to review the UN Refugee Convention, because it has to change. Otherwise, we get thousands of people trying to come across the channel in these ridiculous small boats, all of whom rightly think that if they get here, they've got a good chance of staying, but they're risking their lives in the process, coming from a safe country in France just to try to get to the UK. So on so many different levels, the international law on refugees, the Convention on Refugees, actually creates death, drowning in the English Channel.
Yeah. Curious times. Let's move to this story. It seems the Trump effect has got another scalp. This is Disney, who are apparently going to scrap trigger warnings for their classic films, Dumbo, Peter Pan, signalling a retreat from some of its DEI stuff, the diversity, equality and inclusion area of life. The move comes amid broader scrutiny of corporate woke agendas. Let's have a listen to Labour's James Murray discussing on BBC Question Time how DEI efforts shouldn't go too far.
I think when you talk about the programmes around the diversity, equality, inclusion programmes, I really think this is where we could do with a bit of common sense, because, I think people understand there is a value to having an inclusive approach to your workforce and making sure people have opportunities, but you don't want it to go too far. And I think it is just a common sense question here, where most people have a reasonable view on this.
Most people have a reasonable view of it. Yes, that's very true. I've spotted this a couple of times when my kids have been watching stuff on Disney, and Dumbo was one of them and Peter Pan was the other one. I'm trying to think what was in Peter. I know the controversy over Dumbo is a long, historic debate that film students often have. It's the crow scene, apparently, that is troublesome. We won't delve into that. Peter Pan, I had no idea what little Peter Pan and Tinker Bell have been up to upset folk and why it's not inclusive. I mean, it's got everything going on there, isn't it?
Well, you would have thought so, wouldn't you? But it's interesting that common sense in this issue seems to be breaking out all over the country now. And all those people who are very willing to say that they really don't like Donald Trump, they think he's a bigot, they think he's a bully, they'll say, but I actually really like what he's doing on immigration. I really like what he's doing on DEI, which is the shorthand for diversity and inclusion. A lot of people will admit, if pushed, that actually they approve of what Donald Trump is doing here. And it seems that a lot of it, thank goodness, is now coming to our political discourse here in the UK.
Yeah, we will watch with interest as to what happens here. We're going to take a brief pause, Robert. Back with more in a couple of moments' time. Lots to get your teeth into already. That question we put out at the beginning, should there be a total ban on refugees? Recognising refugee status, but, you know, there are issues we've got to deal with. It's not as if we haven't experienced problems in this area. Should there be a total ban on refugees from Gaza, from this particular area, given what the backdrop is, given the story, given what we know, and perhaps more saliently, given what we don't know? I think that's really the big question mark. 0344 499 1000. Trigger warnings. We'll talk car parks and bad fines being handed out left, right and centre. And also the issue of kids identifying as animals. I'm not making this up. I wish I was. This is Talk.
I think this human rights nonsense has just got completely out of control. And a bit like the legal profession, throughout history, every now and again, they get half a cut above themselves. And I think they're rather more than half a cut above themselves now. And you can't move without having a lawyer now. And that is basically clogging up the arteries of commerce, which has to stop.
Well, it is actually the most damaging thing that any society can be faced with, is too many lawyers, you know, absolutely unbelievable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lady Anne says the judge concerned used to be a Guardian journalist. I thought the judge was married to a Guardian journalist, but either way, yeah, there's no surprise there that Hugo Norton-Taylor, it's a very odd journey, isn't it, from a Guardian journalist to judge. But if you're going to go into this kind of area of law, it's maybe a perfect route. from one to the other. Gaz says, great show. Are these judges and our government really so naive and thick that they haven't spared a thought for the Jewish community here and the ramifications of bringing all and sundry from Gaza into this country? When you have huge conflicts in the Middle East between religions and groups, and you import those groups here, then of course you import the conflict with it. It can only end badly, and they're really playing with fire on this one, as usual. And anyway, the main question, why the hell do they need to come to this country anyway? Says Gaz in Pontefract. It's a great question. Apparently they've got a brother here. There's a brother, so that's the familial link, is the brother. That's why they've chosen the UK, beyond all the other countries they could have selected. Robert Taylor is with us, the journalist and political commentator. Here's a beauty, Robert. Who doesn't once in a while have one of those frustrating parking ticket stories? These are new rules for private parking that will protect motorists from unfair penalties if they take longer than 5 minutes to pay. It follows cases like Rosie Hudson, who we're going to be speaking to later in the programme. Because of a poor phone signal, she couldn't pay on the app, and it led to her being asked for about 2,000 quid on this repeat problem that she was experiencing. And we know there are overzealous parking. I think the minute you do that job, the minute somebody gives you that uniform and a little notepad or a camera now to take pictures, it just sends you crazy. Let's get a reminder of what crazy parking attendants are like. Do you remember the BBC's Parking Pataweo sketch show? Have a look at this.
Parking Pataweo, parking Pataweo, parking Pataweo, and his black and white Cataweo. Forget to feed the meter, Pataweo's eager to pop a ticket on your car and get you towed away.
Yeah, Parking Pataweo just couldn't stop handing them out. That's clearly based on fact as well. We've all met one, Robert, but maybe common sense is coming our way.
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, as a motorist, we do sometimes feel targeted, don't we, by those handing out parking tickets, particularly in these private car parks. And I've had it myself, in central Tunbridge Wells the other day, trying to use the app to pay for parking and finding there wasn't any signal, having to sort of go outside the car park to find one, then come back in and make sure it's all done. 5 minutes is ridiculous. Of course you need more than that. If common sense is breaking out here as well in terms of private car parks, then obviously I'm all for it.
Yeah. And also, if you look at the location of a lot of car parks, then you'd be able to reasonably extrapolate from that, look, if somebody has taken 10 minutes to pay, they're not trying to... You can't do much in that. It's not as if they've parked there because they want to go shopping in the high street. You wouldn't have time to do that. So you could give 10 or 15 minutes and that would still be adequate for most people. I mean, the car park I park in on a daily basis, I've collared a couple of tickets in there as well because, I've forgotten... you think, right, I'll do the app in a second, and then you forget to do that. You get on the train, and then it's out of your mind. So that's arguably my fault. I understand that. But, I mean, if I was to take 10 or 15 minutes between parking and paying, I've not gained any advantage in that. There's nowhere I can go based on the location in that 10 or 15 minutes. I haven't got time to do that. So I think a 15-minute wiggle room is reasonable.
Yeah, of course it is. And what I understand these new guidelines or regulations are going to bring in is that as long as the motorist pays before they exit, regardless if it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, then that's okay. And they're going to be treated with sort of human leniency. It's when people try, as you say, not to pay at all, and very few people do that, then clearly there's a problem and maybe they do need to be fined. Ordinary people who are trying to do the right thing, let's stop this ridiculous fining of them, which can run into hundreds and, in your case that you mentioned there, thousands of pounds.
Yeah. And what about this one? New Home Office funded guidance suggests that kids who identify as animals and walk on all four should be shown some empathy, which has kind of sparked a debate over the rise in subcultures like furries and Therians. I wasn't aware of these. Let's have a listen to Lee Anderson, the Reform UK MP in the House of Commons yesterday, responding to Ashley Doughton, saying that you can identify as a llama.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the new Health Minister has stated that it's OK for a human being to present as a llama. So what I want to know is, if I have a family member who presents as a llama, suddenly becomes ill in the middle of the night, do they send for a doctor, a vet, or a straitjacket?
Mr. Speaker, I can just say to the honourable member that my honourable friend, the Minister for Public Health, believes in treating every human being with the dignity and respect they deserve, even the honourable gentleman.
Yeah, not quite sure Wes Streeting's answer worked there, really, because, of course, the example was specifically not about human beings, people who think they're llamas. Now kids who think they're animals.
Yeah, well, Streeting clearly dodged the question there. I generally rather like Wes Streeting. He's got a lot of common sense in him, but not there, I'm afraid. Now, apparently it is the Children's Society, which, ironically enough, is a charity that tries to prevent child abuse, has drawn up these guidelines for the Home Office. Well, I would suggest, Ian, that encouraging people to think they're llamas or furries or rabbits or whatever else is probably a good definition of child abuse. So I think it's time that the Home Office probably changed its guidelines or looked again at this ridiculous set of new policies.
Yeah, and if your kid was doing, kids do strange things, they every now and again pretend they're a dog. My little boy used to love hiding in the living room, and still does a little bit, and suddenly does a squeaking noise pretending there's a mouse in the house. Kids do that. He doesn't actually think he's any of these things, but if your child is literally living a life as if they are a duck-billed platypus, then I think there's an issue there that you probably need medical assistance.
Yeah, and I think it all stems from this this way that society is encouraging people to think of themselves always as victims. And if you're a llama, you're clearly a victim, aren't you? You need to be looked after. And we must therefore encourage this. It's all about putting victimhood and making people feel that they must be a victim. It's about putting rights before responsibilities. It sounds like a ridiculous story. It is a ridiculous story, but there's obviously a deeper undercurrent here to what's going on.
Yeah, there certainly is. Listen, Robert, thank you as ever. Always good to have you on with us. Robert Taylor with us on the programme, the journalist and political commentator. We'll talk to Henry Smith, the former Tory MP, in a moment on the Gazan story. Should there be a total ban on refugees from Gaza? Steve says, who's going to vet any refugees from Gaza? I mean, right. How would you do that? You can't do that. You literally cannot do that. And if a government's responsibility is about trying to keep people safe, I know that sounds like a bit of a joke, and I know there's a lot of people within our own country who don't make us feel particularly safe. Politicians being one of them. Jeff says this, Jeff's in Hertfordshire, why do we even have Parliament or a government? It seems judges are overruling the government and we're now run by loony left-wing activist judges. I'm amazed they haven't tried to shut you down. I'm sure there's a couple that would be giving it a go. I mean, I'd like to maybe we could invite Judge Hugo Norton-Taylor on the programme. If Judge Hugo Norton-Taylor, he was the tribunal judge, the upper tribunal judge who overturned the Home Office's decision not to grant status to these Palestinians, overthrew the appeal, allowing them to come to the UK on the basis of a right to family life under the European Convention of Human Rights. There it is. 0344 499 1000. Any comments you've heard, anything you've heard along the way and you want to make a comment on, you can do that here on the programme. Dead simple. That is the number. You can message 87222. And of course, if you want to leave a voice note as well, it's often the quickest way to bypass the queues. Get straight in there with a voice note, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 1:30 on Talk. This one comes in from Andy in Manchester. I lost the screen for a second. In answer to your refugee question, yes, a complete ban, because we cannot be sure of people's backgrounds. It's simple. The country is dangerous enough, says Andy in Manchester. It is a fairly curious story, this one, isn't it? Palestinian migrants being given the green light to live in the UK under a scheme meant for Ukrainian refugees. I mean, that in itself may well, you might think, have provoked or certainly highlighted a problem with the application. The family of 6 fleeing Gaza have won the right to join their brother in Britain after an immigration judge ruled the Home Office's rejection was unlawful. And the decision, of course, has sparked fears that this could open some sort of floodgate for more migrants coming, not just from Palestine, but other conflict zones to join relatives in the United Kingdom. Let's speak with Henry Smith, former Conservative MP. Henry, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Your assessment on this story, sir?
Well, it is just quite remarkable that yet again we see activist judges who are essentially making UK immigration policy and using a scheme that is designed for a completely different situation, the matter in Ukraine, rather than that in Gaza, to run roughshod over what Parliament decides on immigration. And really, Parliament needs to very clearly state that it is sovereign when it comes to immigration and national security matters. And this isn't something where a judge sitting alone effectively gets to determine what sort of people and where from in the world can come to this country. It really is something that I hope and I trust the government will urgently address.
You'd think so, but of course the human rights element of this is the sticking point, it seems. I've heard people, it's sort of tacit defence of the judge, say, look, the judge is only upholding the law as it stands, and that law talks about a right to safety and the right to family life, etc., and therefore he was faced with no decision. I'm sure there is wiggle room for the judge, but ultimately ECHR is where we're at on this, and that is something, of course, that your government in the past and continues to support. That's the sticking point, right?
Well, you are right. Until we are bound by the European Convention on Human Rights and the courts that administers decisions from that treaty, until we are free of that, then these decisions will be able to be made by judges. I think it was a very liberal interpretation of the court that was made by this judge in this case. But nevertheless, your fundamental point is absolutely right, that until Parliament reasserts, either by leaving the ECHR or saying that when it comes to matters of immigration and national security, Parliament's wishes come first, which it should be in our constitution. Until Parliament states either of those two things, we're going to see case after case like this. And it sets very dangerous precedents, as you said in your introduction, for people essentially being able to come to this country from any troubled part of the world. Potentially that's several billion people, which is obviously an absurd situation.
I guess one of the other issues is that there are, this particular judge, Judge Hugo Norton-Taylor, I'm sure is a perfectly nice man to have a pint with, maybe not, but you take the point. But when it comes to this area, there are many other Hugo Norton-Taylors out there. There are activists, there are people that will be almost mining for cases to represent and to address or bring over to this country, or others for that matter, throughout Europe. So there is a precedent issue here, isn't there? Once you've given that green light, there is now an example in law that other judges and other agitators in this particular area will point to and say, look, a judge did it before, so why not?
Well, you're absolutely right, Ian. This country suffers from far too many liberal activist lawyers who are seeking to essentially govern this country in a way that they would ideally like to see, and not in a way that those actually elected by the populace typically want to see. And we have far too much of this attitude. And each case builds on case law, which other activist judges and lawyers can look to emulate. And we have this, unfortunately, from the current government, the establishment of this country, that it is very heavily sort of so-called human rights lawyer weighted in a way that really the interests of British people, our security, pressure on housing, on public services, all the other things that large-scale immigration means, is ignored. And it's quite instructive, I think, actually, that other Arab nations are refusing to allow people from Gaza to resettle. Just last year, I was in the Gaza border area, and it was very striking how the Egyptians had erected, I don't know, it was a 20, 30-foot very secure border wall to stop Palestinians coming into Egypt. Very similar situation with Jordan.
I was just going to say that I think the Jordanians feel similar to that too. In terms of where this ECHR law goes, which does seem central to some of these decisions, Kemi Badenoch hasn't made any noises about getting rid of it. We know Reform UK are very vocal about getting rid of it. Some would say, well, it just needs reforming. I would take a guess, Henry, there's almost no chance of that happening. So what should the Conservative position be on this?
Well, the position that I favour is that we leave the ECHR. This country has been developing human rights and protections. Actually, it started in 1215 with the Magna Carta, went through the Civil War, the Bill of Rights, and much more recent pieces of legislation. The ECHR was really brought in after the Second World War to protect people in former dictatorships like Nazi Germany and then subsequently the Soviet bloc countries from abuse by their governments. So the idea that we need to be lectured to by a European Court on Human Rights when we have been defenders of human rights and developers of human rights over hundreds of years is really quite absurd. Other countries, the United States, for example, managed to have their own human rights system. And this country should have its own independent system as well. And Parliament really does need to state that in our Constitution. Parliament is sovereign, and it needs to really, quite literally, lay down the law.
Henry, thank you for your time as ever. He's Henry Smith, former Conservative MP, but he is pro getting rid of the European Court of Human Rights. It is that Article 8 that guarantees this right to a family life. I'm not quite sure. I mean, a right to a family life if you're already here. I could understand that. A right to a family life for, what, anyone in the world that wants to make a case that the UK is where they need to come because their second cousin lives in Bridlington, so therefore it's only right. I have no idea by what kind of mad reckoning a judge, and in this case a very experienced upper tribunal judge, Hugo Norton-Taylor, would come to this conclusion. And as many of you have pointed out when getting in touch, there's not a cat in hell's chance you can assess or in any way find out about the background of individuals, you know, what their allegiances are, what their sense is when it comes to Hamas. This is a country, of course, I don't have no doubts at all that the average person who's been living in Gaza is not a Hamas-supporting terrorist. But it was the government of the country. I would further add to that there's probably quite a few people, maybe not even surprising, that are Hamas supporters, even if they're not part of the government. So to suggest, bearing in mind, you know, see October 7th for details, bearing in mind we kind of know what, you know, these Hamas people are about. We know what their aims are. We know what their thinking is. And we know what their allegiances are. And we know that there is, I appreciate that these are not democratic elections when Hamas found themselves holding power. Your kneecaps would be gone if you didn't vote for them. I get that. Nonetheless, I think we might need to know a little bit about individuals and who they are. You've got no chance of knowing that. I just can't work out how this family of 6 would have ended up here because they've got a cousin or a brother or something that happens to live in the UK. I should also add that this particular judge, Hugo Norton-Taylor, has a little bit of form in this department of rubber stamping those that have tried to argue against Home Office decisions. A rapist who was going to be sent back to Afghanistan being another fairly high-profile case where he said it wouldn't be good to send the rapist back to Afghanistan because those Taliban boys don't go a bundle on that kind of stuff. They don't like that kind of thing. So he might get a hard time. The rapist might get a hard time. Really? Wow. Chris is in Epsom on this point. What do you got for us, Chris?
Hey, hello, Ian.
Hi.
Oh, God. You just wake up every day and it just hits you again and again and again.
Yeah.
This judge has made this ruling. All right. It's not the end of the road for it, thank God. I've jumped onto artificial intelligence and asked it to how do we challenge it. And there is actually four challenges that you go forward on that. First is you have to go back to the upper tier tribunal and ask him to relook at it, revisit it, because it says the word Ukraine in it, not Gaza. And if that fails, then you go to the Court of Appeal. If that fails, you get a judicial review. So there's, after you can go back to the tribunal again for a third time to the upper tier.
Okay.
So there's four things that can be done. And the Home Office need to do this because this is extremely, extremely dangerous for this country. I can't. Well, what stays in my mind from October the 7th, right, is the body of poor Shani in the back of that truck, right, with everyday normal Palestinians spitting on her and hitting her broken body. I think
we don't even want to imagine what else had happened that day.
No, and you saw the things that were going on there. You see the amount of people that are going out and standing there when they're doing this god-awful PR stunts when they're releasing the hostages.
Well, according to a guest on Julia's show, Yvonne Ridley, yesterday, they were very kind to the hostages and gave them goodie bags. She actually said that.
I missed her. I heard Julia say that this morning. Yeah, I missed that.
No, they're lovely, these Gazan, these Hamas terrorists. They're lovely people. They gave goodie bags to the hostages.
Look, they've been fed terrorism and hatred for 2 to 3 decades. Yeah. Okay. Now, anyone that spoke out against them, there's YouTube videos. They kill their own people. All right. They're not of a right mind. If you bring them here, you only have to see why do you think Egypt and Jordan has stuck up those huge walls and razor wire everywhere? Because look what has happened in Lebanon, and the mainstream media don't report it anymore.
Well, if you've got, you're right, if you've got all those surrounding countries and Egypt and Jordan who are saying, no, we think this is a little dangerous if we still... But apparently, meanwhile, over here in the UK, it's fine, actually, because we've got this judge called Hugo, and he can make it right for everybody. I mean, this is beyond bonkers. Listen, I've got to run, Chris. We've hit the clock, no other reason. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. By the way, a little bit of news on the review into the handling of the Sir David Amess murder, the Conservative MP. The murderer, Ali Harbi Ali, was held under the government's I say he was held. He was arrested, and it turned out he had been on the government's counter-terrorism programme, Prevent. They found assessments were problematic and his case was closed too quickly, according to the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis. So had a look at this fella who went on to very brutally, I don't even want to describe the sad demise of David Amess. We were live on air that day when this happened. The man was reported to Prevent and they went, nothing to see here, we better close this case. Where have I heard that before? Recently. 0344 499 1000. It's just gone 1:45. Lots to get through. More comment coming in from you, certainly on that refugee question and the other subjects that are up and running as well. By way of a little bit of light in some very challenging headlines, I want to give you a chance here to win some money. Not just a few quid, not just 100 quid. A lot of money. We're talking £25,000. Here's how you could be in with a chance of winning.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Because at the end of the day, apparently it says that now 15% of the total number of people behind bars are people who have been sent back in after they've been released. So there's clearly a problem, and you've always said this, Vanessa, with what happens when they're in there as well, because what they're not being encouraged to do is figure out how to stay away.
I can't say this enough. The bigger picture is how our prison system has been run into and our justice system for that matter, right, has been run into the ground.
Yeah, right.
Across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This remark, have you seen the Bayern mob in Gaza when the hostages are released? 95% minimum support Hamas. They're brainwashed from birth, and that's exactly it. I mean, it's not like a mad right-wing thing, is it, to say, I think it might be a silly idea to import those people, the people you saw in the background when the hostages, all of that, to bring those people here right now. That seems a bit bonkers to me. You haven't got to be some acute anti-immigrant, xenophobic, right-wing dodgepot to draw that conclusion. You've just got to be alive, have a pulse and a semblance of sanity to go, this is a terrible idea. Brittany from the USA here. Serious question, says Brittany. Who the hell is running the damn country? A bunch of blooming idiotic clowns. Yes, I get wanting to help people, but when your own elderly are freezing, economy is shot to crap. Come on, man. Something needs to be done. Get their head out of the sand, drink a massive cup of reality coffee and look around at what the hell is going on with the country first over asylum seekers, says Brittany in the USA, where the USA are at the very least trying to address some of the nonsense. Wait, I don't know where all that nonsense, it all collided, didn't it? Simultaneously, you had Biden, who was, you know, well signed up to all this malarkey. Macron and Trudeau, you know, Trudeau picking up a journalist when they used the term mankind. Do you remember that clip? I'm sorry, we don't use the word mankind. We say human, we say people kind. People kind? Really? You don't say mankind? You know, man biblically doesn't refer to gender, it just refers to human being. When man entered the earth is not a gender-specific term. In ecclesiastical readings, it is merely identifying the arrival of your human being, legal or otherwise. 0344 499 1000. Yes, it's gone nuts. Kate is in Lincolnshire. On this very point, Kate, what have you got for us? Hi.
Well, it purely is numbers. I'm one person and I just have one sister. But like many people, I thought, oh, our family history. Yeah. And so I delved into it. And so my grandparents, I knew who they were. Sure. I had an idea of my great-grandparents, of which there were a few more, and so I had a few family trees to look. And I put a block on years. I stopped at 500 years ago, and the number of people related to me in the world that I could find that were alive was 22,000. Wow. Now, times that by whatever number you want, but it's a hell of a lot for England.
So your point is anyone can find a relative?
No, my point is that it's far too many. We're all related, say, I'm English, and but going back, it goes right back. They spread out. And so I've got relatives who are alive in Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, here, there. And so if they all want to come back to be close to me.
Yeah. I think they should, Kate. You can fit 22,000 in that mansion of yours in Lincolnshire.
I'm sure I could. I could move someone over, but oh no, it would have to be the sheep, wouldn't it?
Well, you never know. Good luck with it anyway. Kate, thank you very much indeed. I think there was something in what she was saying there, in that, you know, you can make that family link all over the place. And if everybody suddenly returns and said, I want to come back home, where would home be? You do one of those DNA tests. Are they a bit iffy, those DNA tests? Anyone done one of those things where you send off like £62.50 and back comes some kind of kit? Ted, who's Julia's producer, did one. And frankly, it was disturbing. And all it did was confirm what we'd already knew. And that's that Ted is not just a wrong-un, he's from a long line of wrong-uns. Back to your calls. This will be Billy over there in Denmark. Billy, how you doing?
How's it going, Ian?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Every day it gets worse. I'm beginning to wonder if Britain is a dumping ground for the trash of the rest of the world. And if this government is just a Bond villain, just being cut out and put in place.
I think the Bond villain in this case is the judge, Hugo Norton-Taylor.
Nobody in their right mind can sit anywhere in the House of Parliament, in a judge's chambers, and look at this and actually realistically think this is a good idea.
Look, I said it before, I mean, we can have our own views on who the people are that are coming here, but let's assume, you know, that most people are not here with bad intent. You know, they're not wrong.
We've got children. They should be first into this equation.
Indeed. But let's assume they've got bad intent. We've still got no way of knowing that, Billy. We've got no way of being able to look at this family of six.
See this is a bad idea.
Say again?
Stevie Wonder can see this as a bad idea.
I think you might be right. And I'm always happy to have a reference to Stevie Wonder in the first hour of the programme. Nothing wrong with that. The world's gone bonkers. Listen, Billy, thank you for that. It's interesting you're in Denmark, where they haven't got a right-wing government, but they have got on top of immigration. They've been able to sort it out and didn't require any great political seismic change of what they'd had before, which is, I think, a rather interesting template. We should keep our eye on that. One here, no name given. I'm confused. Why does the European Court of Human Rights apply to non-European asylum seekers? Can anyone explain that to me? That's a really good point. That's a very good point. The European Court of Human Rights has nothing to do with the European Union, by the way. It's a separate thing and predates the EU. However, it is European, right? It's about European-based issues. I have no idea how this crossed the desk of this country whatsoever. The Home Office, in fairness to Yvette Cooper and co, did say, no, you can't come here. But a judge went, oh, yes, you can. I'm Hugo Norton-Taylor, don't you know? And I've got heady degrees and qualifications in law, particularly relating to asylum. He rubber-stamped the whole thing, and along they come because they got a brother over here somewhere. 0344 499 1000. You want to get in touch, that's the number, 87222 on the messages. First, though, news headlines at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3 minutes after 2 o'clock, welcome back to the home of Common Sense. We are discussing that story, the Palestinian migrants who applied through a scheme, this is to come to the UK, applied through a scheme that was meant for Ukrainian refugees, but they got granted asylum to live in the UK. Nobody can quite work this out. The Home Office said, we don't think this is a good idea, but the judge overruled it, and the judge overruled it using the ECHR. Why wouldn't he? We also can't further work out why the ECHR would apply to somebody coming from Palestine. Anyway, we'll do the rest, and we'll take your calls on that. Also, the story of the Australian footballer and Chelsea striker Sam Kerr, who's been found not guilty of causing racially aggravated harassment after calling a Metropolitan Police officer stupid and white. But the jury went, no, nothing to see here, Governor. It was a curious case, but her arguments as to why she was kind of entitled to that view are off the charts. We'll come to that a little later as well. And the future of a bill to legalise assisted dying has now been thrown into doubt as MPs who previously backed it say they're now reconsidering after the requirement for a High Court judge to sign off decisions has been scrapped. We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. We're joined by Kevin Schofield, political editor at HuffPost UK. Good to have you with us, Kevin.
Hello, Ian.
Hot footing it from Westminster.
Indeed, yes.
How was it, PMQs? Because we had a very slightly different approach from Kemi Badenoch this week.
Yeah, I mean, she asked the right questions. The problem for her was...
In the wrong order?
yeah, not necessarily in the correct order. She did ask the right questions, the right topics, but she got straight answers from Keir Starmer, and they weren't the answers that she was wanting or obviously expecting, because she just kept asking the same question on what you just mentioned, on this Gaza family being granted asylum in this country using the Ukraine scheme. Keir Starmer said, yeah, it's wrong, I agree with you, we're looking to close a loophole and we're investigating it and we'll make sure it can't happen again. Which was not the answer she wanted. She wanted him to be...
She wanted a row.
And exactly, she wanted him to sort of be a bit mealy-mouthed about it, but he was very... And then she just asked the same question again, and he said, well, the answer's still yes. And then she did it a third time, and he said, you asked me the first time, the answer was yes. The second time, the answer was yes. You've asked me again, the answer is still yes. And he just completely floored her with that one.
I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it? And when it comes to issues around ECHR, which, I mean, we can... The loophole with the Ukrainian thing is one thing.
Yeah.
The ECHR element is another one, not an area that Kemi Badenoch's going to go too big on because she supports it remaining in place.
Yes, that's
it's only
right.
really Reform UK, I think, that are advocating to get rid of it.
Yeah, that's right. I think Robert Jenrick, in the leadership campaign, didn't he? He said he would pull Britain out if he became Prime Minister, but Kemi Badenoch wouldn't go that far. She wouldn't rule it out. She certainly wouldn't say that she would definitely do it. I mean, there's also the debate over judicial overreach, and Keir Starmer did make the point it should be up to Parliament to decide what the immigration policy is, not judges. Judges should just interpret the law.
Because there's quite a lot of wiggle room for the judge, isn't there? I mean, the judge, if he was sitting here now, this Hugo chap, he would say, no, I was just interpreting the law. It's like, well, the law does have some wiggle room in it. It's, you're allowed to kind of, within the spirit of the law, make a judgment.
Yeah.
But then there's such a thing as something that looks as if it very much goes against the law.
Well, the clue is in the title, isn't it? The Ukraine family scheme.
Yeah.
You think it was set up specifically in the wake of the invasion in 2022 to help families fleeing Ukraine to come and settle in this country. So you would think it would be impossible for someone from another country to use the Ukraine scheme, and that is, I think, what's baffled the Home Office. They're trying to now investigate as to what this loophole is, close it, whether that is a piece of emergency legislation or whether it can be done more quickly than that, in order to prevent it from happening again.
And you'd also think, I mean, in my head, I'm sure a student of law would be able to put us right, but the ECHR wouldn't apply if it was somebody coming from another country.
I think if they are trying to claim asylum in this country and we are signatories to the ECHR, then I think that's how it would.
I mean, I can see it when they're being kicked out of this country, how our country would therefore use it. But to use it to come in, you can still do that.
Well, so they came. They were, as I understand it, the Home Office threw out their application for asylum. They then appealed. I don't know, are they currently resident in this country? Are they currently here?
It's a bit sketchy.
Yeah.
I got the impression they I think, yeah.
Even though they don't have asylum, then they probably are still covered by the ECHR because that is we are signed up to it.
Indeed. The UK is also going to challenge and toughen up citizenship rules, making it harder for refugees entering illegally, including small boats, to gain citizenship. I'm not sure this really touches the sides of the problem.
No.
The problem is the sheer amount of people that are just turning up on a weekly basis. Rain, wind, shine, whatever.
Yeah.
There's always, you know, hundreds of people, sometimes thousands when the weather's really good, etc. But is that really getting citizenship? I don't think that's necessarily the initial goal of those trying to get here.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, it's the government will paint it as another deterrent. We don't have Rwanda anymore. And there's arguments whether that was a deterrent at all, but this would deter. If your goal is ultimately to get citizenship, to become a British citizen and get a passport, then the government's basically saying, well, forget it, you've got no chance. But what I find fascinating about it is, you know, we've had, well, on Wednesday, and it's 3 days really of the government talking tough on immigration, which it's all been driven by the surge in Reform UK, and that's why we had Kemi Badenoch last week suddenly producing a policy, which she said she wasn't going to produce for 2 or 3 years on immigration. And it's fascinating that the parties are having to, the two main parties, I should say, are trying to scrabble around to prove their credentials on immigration because they're both very concerned about reform.
Another issue, this came up in PMQs as well, also certainly this has broken since too, the Prevent Learning Review and David Amos's death. The killer was referred to Prevent. It's that story again almost.
Yeah.
And Prevent when we'll close this one because I don't think there's a lot to see, which makes you wonder about what's the point of Prevent? How authentic is it? We saw it in Southport, similar thing. I know it was technically a child when this person was in Southport was first referred, but the killer of David Amos wasn't a kid, and you wonder. What do you have to satisfy to be seen as a person no longer of interest?
Well, quite absolutely. I mean, these are literally life or death decisions in many cases, as we're seeing that the Prevent programme are making, and they seem to be getting them wrong, or certainly getting a few very serious ones wrong. And I think there will be understandably calls for a root and branch reform, if not a complete replacement of the Prevent programme, because if people like that are slipping through the net, then you have to ask yourself, what is the point of the programme?
Absolutely. In terms of Kemi Badenoch, she's, we said at the beginning, in terms of her performance at the Dispatch Box, and it is a performative thing, being a leader of a party. You've got to, be able to strike a blow. And you've certainly got to make an impact. And I think most people, even supporters, would say on a quiet day, she hasn't really made a great impact. It's not an area she seems to do with ease or comfort.
No, and it feels a bit like Groundhog Day. I come here every week and we talk about how the PMQs go, and you think, well, actually, Kemi Badenoch, she didn't have a very good week. She started off, you cut her a bit of slack at the beginning, first 2 or 3 weeks. It is a very alien environment. It's like nothing that she will ever have experienced before, standing there with all those Labour MPs, over 400 of them, screaming and shouting at her. You cut her a bit of slack. But she's been in the door quite a few, that's 100 days now. That's 3 months, and she doesn't seem to be getting any better. In fact, on today's evidence, you could even argue that she's actually getting worse. I mean, that one today was one of the worst, if not the worst.
Well, it's a bit of a howler, isn't it? Because I mean, she's got people around her who advise. And I know maybe she took a punt on the Starmer thing, thinking he was going to get into some kind of, because he himself was a human rights lawyer, was she getting into that territory of thinking, oh, Starmer's going to come back with a defence of the judge?
Absolutely, yeah.
And explain that, well, it looks bad, but actually it is, or something like that. But I think any advisor would have said, well, this is PMQs. This is it might not be a great orator, but he's a reasonable operator, Starmer. So he would know that she was going to ask that. So he's come back and straight away batted the whole thing back to her and said, yeah, totally agree, it's a loophole. It's like, oh, right, OK.
Yeah, but she should have war-gamed that and said, well, if he comes back and says this, then you then go to this. Instead of just repeating the same question again and hoping that he trips up a second time and then a third time. I mean, at one point she actually did make him appear almost like Tony Blair He was able to just effortlessly swat away in the way that he used to do from time to time. So,
but she should have. I mean, there should be people around her that could have predicted that. That's the whole point. It's like a chess game.
Yeah.
Should have been able to go, well, he might come back with this, and if he comes back with this, you've got to leave that and then move on to something else. But she went 3 times on the same point.
And interestingly, I think I've said to you before, the way it works is after PMQs is finished, we then as journalists then have this thing called the huddle, where you first of all get to ask questions of the PM spokespeople, and then they shuffle off, and then Kemi Badenoch's people come in and we ask them questions, and the Tories weren't there today. Now, I don't know why, but
they just didn't show up.
They weren't there. We were told after PMQs there won't be a Conservative huddle.
Is there a word on the street that, you know, there's unhappiness in the ranks of Conservative MPs?
Yeah, definitely. There is definitely disappointment. You could tell on their faces today, actually. Again, you said one of the important things with PMQs is it should be a morale booster, you know, for your own MPs. You know, if you're, especially when you've only got 120 MPs, you know, you're a relatively small one. So the onus is on you to really get the wind in their sails, and they just looked deflated. They were just kind of shuffling, looking at their feet like, oh my goodness, this isn't good. And it's interesting as well, you watch Robert Jenrick, his leadership campaign has never stopped. If you look at his social media, he's Shadow Justice Secretary, but you know, he's commenting on everything. He's so strange, so far out of his brief, you think, this guy's still on manoeuvres.
He's got a lot. He's on manoeuvres,
he's waiting.
He's on manoeuvres. But you see, the problem they have now, if you think about it, all those years in Parliament where, you know, the only centre-right party was the Conservatives, and they sat there, they held that terrain, there was nothing else dangling over them, there was no other backdrop. Then, of course, you've got these 5 reform boys sitting over the way there who punch well above their weight. Rupert Lowe in particular, as soon as Farage stands up, the place goes quiet. He gets a bigger kind of audience attention than Ed Davey does, or many of the others. That was never there before. That's what she's dealing with now. She's almost, to those looking for a right-wing voice, they're not finding it in her.
No, you're right. They've never been attacked from the right before, the Conservatives, and this is a potentially existential threat. You know, I don't think that's overstating it. You've only got to look at the opinion polls. You know, it's now a trend that the Reform are consistently ahead of certainly the Conservatives and on occasion Labour. Now, we're still 4 years out from an election, of course, but if in a couple of years' time we've been through the local elections and the Reform have done well and the Tories haven't, they're still in front in the opinion polls, you know, it's going to be seriously dicey for Kemi Badenoch.
She's not going to be there in a year. It's as simple as that.
See, I thought, no, she'll be fine because they've been through so many leaders, they want a period of calm, they don't want to go through all that nonsense again. But the evidence in front of you is that she's not doing very well.
But you see, I also don't think Robert Jenrick is the person either. And you know, maybe for slightly different reasons. I mean, he came in with us. He was on Talk a couple of times. He came in on this show, and you know, again, if it's about somebody kind of sounding the part, looking the part, I don't think he ticks those boxes. Because people who are looking for that kind of person will go, well, Nigel Farage does that, but he does it better.
Yeah, and he's always...
So why do I need Jenrick?
And you know where Farage has always stood, whereas Jenrick initially was a moderate. You know, he was a moderate Conservative, and he has been on a journey
somebody wants to
way out to the right, and people think, well, hang on a minute, can we really trust this guy?
Well, he's done the sort of Liz Truss journey, hasn't he, in that respect? I mean, you know, maybe not quite as bonkers as Liz's journey, but he was, somebody once described him as the librarian of the Tory party. He was so quiet, he didn't really say anything.
Well, I remember when Boris Johnson was initially going for leader, I'm fairly sure it was Oliver Dowden, Robert Jenrick and Rishi Sunak wrote a piece for The Times basically saying we're supporting Boris, and that was seen as like, wow, he's managed to get these sort of moderate Cameroon types to support him. He's unstoppable, whereas now Jenrick is, you know, way off to the right.
Well, I mean, Jenrick might... I mean, he is pro-leaving the ECHR, so he's made that quite clear. That would mark him out as being very different to kind of Kemi and quite a lot of other Conservatives. But then the problem you have as the Tory leader, that also upsets some other Conservatives.
Totally.
The sort of One Nationers who are having none of this.
Absolutely, you know, so you have to try somehow to bring them with you. And it's all very well saying, right, we need to go over to the right because that's where Reform are and they're eating our support there. But you're right, you've got to try and shore up your left flank as well.
The assisted dying bill, this is becoming, you know, fairly difficult for those that are supportive of it. Kim Ledbetter, the Labour MP, it's hers. I mean, she's owned this. She spent a lot of time working on it, but it seems to have less support now. They've removed this "you will need the approval of a High Court judge" bit, because the judiciary went, we ain't got that many High Court judges. We really can't spend time when we're trying to try murder cases and rape cases by having a judge or many judges overseeing these kind of cases. So they then talked about it being a panel of experts, including social workers, psychiatrists, that kind of stuff. And that has spooked quite a lot of previous supporters of the bill, Kevin.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, voted for the bill with some trepidation, but they were reassured by this High Court judge. And Kim Leadbeater said it repeatedly, you know, this will make it the strongest safeguards of any such legislation in the world. We'll have a High Court judge will have the final say. And then at the last minute, before it goes to line-by-line scrutiny, she changes, she moves the goalposts, really. And a lot of those MPs, I think, who were not completely sold on it but voted for it at second reading, are now thinking, oh, I'm not so sure about this now. And you only need 28 who voted for it to vote against it, and it falls. So I think it's looking a little bit
a little wobbly. We're out of time, Kevin. Good to see you, though. Kevin Schofield with us. He is called political editor, HuffPost UK, with us on the programme. More from you in a couple of moments. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
First of all, people won't forgive or forget the damage that the Tories did to our country with mass immigration, with not doing Brexit properly, with raising taxes, raising grotesque, wasteful government spending like the £100 million back shed. And they're saying that our policy is actually the common sense policies that can make people better off, that can get rid of the daft lunacy of net stupid zero. The only net zero we want is net zero immigration. And people trust us because actually we've got a track record of achieving and doing things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 22 minutes after 2 o'clock. Let's go to Mary in Glasgow. Mary, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, it's to do with your previous subject of the Gaza refugees.
Yeah.
No Arab country, no Muslim country will accept any of these people, because all they've ever done in Egypt and Lebanon and all the rest of it is cause total havoc. They've expunged them from their countries and back into the Gaza Strip. Why on earth should we start to take them?
You do have to ask a reasonable question, don't you? If those, the nearest neighbours to these people, and even the nearest of nearest neighbours, those that are slightly further afield, but have commonality in religion and ideas, etc., if those guys are saying, we can't take these people, why would a Western democracy do that?
Absolutely, because all they do is cause total havoc in Egypt and Lebanon and all the other Middle Eastern countries. They've already chipped them out, thrown them out on several occasions.
Yeah.
It's an utter outrage.
But this is where we're at. I mean, we've got judges in this country making these balmy decisions.
Well, it's not on. Anyway, it's something else, Ian, on a lighter note.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you think we could possibly have a referendum in this country, in the United Kingdom, to become the 51st state?
Or maybe that's the way forward, right? That might
perhaps
sort us out.
After all, we gave birth to this wonderful, great experiment that is the United States of America.
Yeah, essentially, we kind of half own it, frankly, in spirit.
Absolutely.
In spirit, it's ours. So what?
22 members of the founding fathers, over 60-odd founding fathers, were Scots. So I think the United Kingdom should embrace the rebirth of this wonderful experiment and take back what is really ours.
Do you know, there's a really good question in that. Listen, thank you, Mary. Really appreciate your call. It's an interesting point, that, isn't it, that Donald Trump has made it known that he wants to kind of make all sorts of places the 51st state, from Greenland to Canada. And they're all going, no, you can't do that. It's a terrible idea. I mean, Canada would clearly be much improved if they had a firework up the trouser leg of what has been there for the last load of years. But in fact, we could be the first voluntary country that says, no, actually, do you know what? We would like to be the 51st state. I mean, just genuinely, out of interest, notionally speaking, how would that kind of pan out? Would you vote for that? If somebody said, right, we're going to have a referendum, we're going to become the 51st state of the United States, and our new leader is Donald Trump, would you vote for that? I reckon, I think we might be in a kind of Brexit situation. So we'd have lots of people agitating, go, no, you can't do that. So there's laws against this thing. No, there's democracies and there's things called referendum. People voted for it. So you would have the usual suspects who didn't want any of it. I think that perhaps in the same way that the reason Labour got in is because there was a sort of a thinking, and I haven't really met anybody who did this, but clearly people did, sort of buyer's remorse, as it were. That I think a lot of people just went, it can't be any worse. I honestly think it was it can't be any worse general election 2024. July the 4th, 2024 will go down in the history books. If somebody hasn't got it on there on Wikipedia, get on there now and edit it. Say it also known as the It Can't Be Any Worse election, where people voted not in large numbers, but large enough to give what is a thumping majority, but a very small share of the vote, to Keir Starmer. I honestly think that it had to be based on it can't get any worse. There could be, right, there's no philosophical reason. No one went, oh, these guys are really good, aren't they? David Lammy, Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer. What could go wrong? Well, really? Are you asking that question with a straight face, mate? What could go wrong? Maybe they've got something going on that, you know, well, maybe there's a inner core. They've got a secret plan. Or maybe it's just, well, it can't be any worse than the Tories. That's why people put Keir Starmer in power. Martin is in... We'll get some comments on that. Martin's in Belfast. What have you got for us, Martin? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. I used to phone you quite regularly. I used to be Martin from Bracknell. I'm now Martin from Belfast.
What happened, Martin? How did this seismic journey go from Bracknell to Belfast?
Yeah, the seismic journey, Ian, is because particularly my elder son and his two children just couldn't tolerate any longer what was happening in the southeast of England in so many different ways. But the town he was in is one of those towns, one of those 30, that has been cited with the same sort of problem as Oldham, Rotherham, you know, all the others, and he just couldn't trust his 11, 12-year-old daughter to just go into that town and be safe.
Wow.
And that was his driving force.
So he literally left his own country.
He left his own country, and of course, Ma said to me, his Ma said to me, well, all my five grandchildren are over in Ireland, because my youngest son's been here for 14 years and built his life here, and has got a very good way of life here. He travels regularly to Dublin because he's the coach, the education coach for badminton in the whole of Ireland.
Yeah, sure.
But so we said, well, we've got to follow. And quite frankly, I was prompted here. I haven't phoned you for ages. I was prompted because I was listening. Whenever I'm driving, I'm listening to talk. I used to listen to talk or watch talk on the TV, but now I watch TV news. But all you guys are saying the same things. Right? You're all saying, and your opening salvo this morning was just spot on. All this ridiculous stuff. I mean, a rapist is a rapist. Right? If he's raped and he's illegal, or even if he's legal and not a citizen, he should go.
You might think so, right?
well, you'd think in a sane world, you'd think he'd go. But is this a sane world any longer? I mean, I'm absolutely... I'm so frustrated with the fact that there's all this focus on minority after minority after minority.
Yeah.
What is wrong with focusing on the majority? The majority of people in the United Kingdom, rather than the individuals. I mean, how about, they talk about human rights. How about the majority's human rights? Haven't they got some rights?
Well, you might think so. You might think there would be, common sense human rights as well.
Well, I mean, obviously, talk the home of common sense, of course. But there are so many people that I know. I mean, I was politically active in Windsor. I was a member of the Conservative Party. So frustrated with the Conservative Party. I'm not a member any longer. When I've come to Ireland, OK, Stormont has got its issues, but I'm now a member of the DUP. And the difference here is family here is still so important.
Sure.
Right? There's still a lot of common sense talked in Northern Ireland. Yes, they have their issues. Yes, they have. Obviously, we all know the Troubles and the two different religions. That's fading. But the number one threat, if you like, right, in Ireland is a shared island. And there's clearly a political party or two here that wants to be. And going back to the main issue that you were thrusting upon, and let's face it, it is an Islamic issue. I'm sorry, it is. And that's it. Not all the same. I play badminton and sports with lots of Sri Lankans, Indians, whatever, right? But, we've got an open border here because of, the Stormont Agreement, right? The Good Friday Agreement. It's an open border. The open border is into the EU, right? So here we are again. Now, that's being resisted, but it won't be, if the boats across the channel stop, then they'll come back through and the Irish Sea is a bit more difficult. At any rate, I just felt that for once, the frustration that exists across my family and many other families about what is happening, in England and all this nonsense that goes on, I just felt that I had to pick up the phone and
I'm glad you did. It's a great story as well, Martin, which sounds as if it's got a very flourishing and positive ending to it from what you've done. Martin, thank you. Martin, now in Belfast, was in Bracknell, got fed up with the place, legged it. Ain't having none of this. Starting again, starting fresh. And I get it. I think many people do. Sue says, I would definitely vote to become the 51st state of America. Ian in York says, we need to incorporate 50 more counties into Britain, then get them to have local council elections to see who they want. Texasshire, New Yorkshire, Manhattan as the Manhattanton as the county town. You could do some of that, couldn't you? Kentsville. What's wrong with that? I mean, there's loads you could do. Would that work for you? We could get all American and stuff and start, I don't know, getting into the sort of American way of life in lots of fun and stereotypical ways. We could do that, pronouncing words incorrectly. You know, that's a good start. Having bizarrely white teeth, not necessarily the sign of good, healthy teeth, just very, very white because you got chemical in their water. You know what I mean? It could be a fun experiment. Maybe there's an era for that on the way. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. This was I thought this was an extraordinary story. The Chelsean Australian footballer Sam Kerr, she's been cleared of racially aggravated harassment following an incident at Twickenham police station. The 31-year-old was accused of abusing PC Stephen Lovell after a dispute with a taxi driver. Have a listen to what happened.
You should have spoken to the...
Stupid and white. Honestly, you guys are stupid and white.
Okay.
I'm over the... This is the world problem. Wait on the call. Wait on the call. Wait on the call.
All right. I'll go over at the moment then at 3:17. You're under arrest for criminal damage because there's an allegation that you've smashed that taxi window. You're also under arrest for racially aggravated public order for the comments that you've said.
There it is, a racially aggravated public order. That didn't stand. The jury cleared her. Kerr's lawyers argued her comments were about power and privilege, while Kerr testified that she felt she was treated differently due to her skin colour. Let's speak with the barrister and writer. Stephen Barrett is with us. Stephen, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Hi.
Good to have you with us. I mean, this was an extraordinary case, but she was found not guilty. Job done.
She was found not guilty, and that is our system. So what we should do instead is talk about the underlying philosophy and the arguments of her lawyers and what is going on here and whether we all agree with this underlying philosophy, which is the idea that white people are inherently in some way powerful. And as a result of being in some way inherently powerful, you're allowed to be racist to us.
Yes.
And I think that we need to challenge this because what's actually quite touching if you read more of the detail is that the officer was genuinely upset. But the man had not expected any of this. Probably because we are an established and successful multicultural country, you don't expect people to start going around saying this type of thing. And if you looked at her demeanour, and you bleeped out all of the swear words, but she wasn't behaving how a polite person behaves. That's not how I would behave towards a police officer
Well, indeed.
of any race. You know, it's just not.
And if you call somebody effing white and stupid, or effing stupid and white, or whatever, or pick your order, I would imagine that comes firmly under a certain banner.
Well, I mean, to my mind, the ideology is racist. So that we need to get this clear. What is racism? Because if racism is if we accept her arguments, if we accept her lawyer's arguments, then you're never going to be able to be racist against white people. And I think that's just clearly wrong. I think that just has to be, by all logic, wrong. There's no way that can be true. And I would rather use the definition of racism used by Dr. Martin Luther King, who's a very good and decent man, and no reason at all not to use his definition, and to say that people should not be judged by the colour of their skin. They should be judged by the content of their character. Yeah. And if you see how that young lady was behaving, she clearly does not have a very good character. And it doesn't matter. I don't care what skin she's got.
Indeed. I mean, that was the curious bit, that, she talked about their kind of... And I did hear somebody this morning try to sort of create the argument about power structures and whiteness and historic positions of power inherent within the system, and somebody like Sam Kerr, as somebody who has, I think, Anglo-Indian lineage, she would be the victim of that. So the police officer, even without saying it, was a kind of a tacit threat by dint of his existence, almost. That's how bonkers it is.
Yes, and I think that argument is so rubbish that really it should collapse under its own weight. But I think people need to look at how racist that is. That is basically saying, by dint of an inherent trait, their whiteness, that people cannot change, they are somehow inherently bad. I mean, it's clearly not how power was actually divided up historically. It's clearly not how power is divided up today. Yeah. But even historically, it's wrong in our country, because I'm afraid, Ian, as you probably know, power is divided with the Normans having it all and the Saxons having none of it. And so that's how it was for hundreds and hundreds of years. My two grandfathers I never met, because both were dock workers in Liverpool, and both died in their early 60s because they had unhealthy lifestyles, and because dock working is a hard and onerous task. And dock workers did tend not to live till their 80s and 90s. So I never got to meet either. I don't consider that a privilege. So this is just a nonsense idea that there is some sort of racial system that we live in or have ever lived in. And I certainly don't want to live in one. I just don't want to judge people based upon the colour of their skin. I want to judge them on the content of their character.
Would
I must be allowed to do that.
Well, you'd think so. I mean, it seems fairly reasonable to me, and I always thought that courts were all about that. That you are able to, your lawyer, your defence lawyer, is able to, be able to usurp the prosecution case by saying, well, it looked bad, but blah blah. That's the whole point of our system, and it's great. But the idea that it kind of just boils down to a colour thing, and her comments were interesting. She said, I regret, during the trial, she said she regretted the way she expressed herself, but added, I feel the message is still relevant. She denied using whiteness as an insult, and she claimed I believed it was him, the officer, using his power and privilege over me because he was accusing me of being something I'm not. I mean, that is... But by any standards, a sort of, if you put that in a dissertation at university, you'd be kicked out for idiocy, frankly. I mean, it's just a stupid thing to say. But that's the line she went on. I've no doubt that a very tasty lawyer was able to coach her in that line in some respect. But she believed it was him, the officer, using his power and privilege to accuse her of something she's not.
I think we really need to nip this in the bud now. So the last time we had what seemed like an odd verdict was over the statue case in Bristol, and the judge allowed the barrister to put an argument to the jury, and then we basically used the machinery of the system, because we had a robust government who was more than willing to push back, to get that changed so that in future that argument would not be allowed to be put to the jury. I think we should use that mechanism to attack this argument, not least of all, Ian. So for 14 years I've mentored kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they are of all races. You know, and I consider many of them my spare children. You know, and I don't want half of my spare children told that they're being inherently powerless, and I don't want half of my spare children being told that they're inherently discriminatory and bad.
Yes.
The fact is, all the kids are exactly the same because they come from disadvantaged backgrounds. That's what makes them the same. You know, and that's the burden that they have to overcome, not some sort of mad view of the state that tells them that they're weak and pathetic. They're not.
Indeed. And I think in this particular case, I think I'm right in saying, Stephen, that the judge said he disagreed with the jury, you know, which again is great that we have a system where the judge can go, well, it's not what I would have done, but there's 12 of you. It was unanimous. What do you think would have swung a jury to believe that someone using the term effing stupid and white was not a racist comment? What would they have, in what context would they have been able to place that in their own head to be satisfied this person wasn't guilty?
Well, they would have bought into this argument about inherent power structures, which we think is so silly we don't really need to dissect it. But maybe we should challenge it much more abruptly, because otherwise seemingly sensible people are buying into this argument. It is all around us. It is being promoted by all sorts of institutions, and all sorts of public money is being spent to spread this message. But it is inherently nonsense, and we do need to challenge it. I wish the government would use the legal mechanisms available to challenge it. I will be very surprised if they do.
And of course, what had happened here, just a bit of background, is that she'd got into a cab with her partner, and one of them had vomited in the taxi. So the taxi driver was very upset about this, and some sort of argument ensued, and the cab driver decided to drive straight to the police station. In this, a window was kicked in, as I understand it, by one of the women, and that's what caused this moment to arrive on the desk of the humble PC, who discovered he was white and stupid merely moments later. Police asked her if she had about £100 to cover her fare and clean up the vomit, as well as extra damage to the taxi. She yelled that she was not paying for some dodgy C-words window, and that she would get the effing Chelsea lawyers on this, meaning the Women's Super League club for which she plays. The court heard that when she was asked about paying, she brought up her banking app and waved her phone about to the police as though to show them she had plenty of money. I mean, she was half cut at the time by all accounts, but I mean, this is not pleasant behaviour, right?
No, it's deeply unpleasant behaviour, and it shouldn't really be directed at officers. I mean, one of the things that I do in life, I'm more than happy to criticise, the leadership of the Met. And when we have a dodgy police officer, obviously we all need to know about that and deal with it. But the vast majority of officers are extremely decent people who work extremely hard in order to keep us safe, which is why we show them basic courtesy and respect. This lady was not behaving in any way decently. She wasn't behaving pleasantly. These are all deeply wrong things to be doing. And in terms of power structure, the fact that she's extremely wealthy means that she probably has more power than the poor officer. And it's just, I think it's time that we must challenge this argument, because it's not going to lead to anywhere good. There is no way, I can't see how you get to a good place by even believing this nonsense. So I think it does need challenging. I think it's very disappointing that our government will be too spineless to do anything. That upsets me more, because at least the last one would have challenged it.
Spot on. Listen, Stephen, it's great to have you on with us. We will speak again, I hope. Stephen Barrett is barrister, Spectator writer, on the curious conclusion of a jury who decided that actually she wasn't guilty of any kind of racial harassment or racially aggravated harassment, despite calling a police officer, that was in the kind of custody suite, effing stupid and white, or effing white and stupid, whatever way round you choose to look at those words. So the argument goes, and it's interesting, I'm vaguely sympathetic to a little bit of this, all right? If you called a black person the same thing, let's say a non-white person, or use the N-word or the P-word or something like that, in those cases there is a history to that. There is a power to that word because of its historic use, the horrendous and appalling eras and areas and policies and decisions and rules that different people have had to live by, different to everybody else. It's got a history, all right? We haven't got that history. If you're white, you haven't quite got the history, so it hasn't got the same resonance. If somebody called me I was about to use the H word. I don't think I'm actually even allowed to use that anymore, which was just a funny word, the one that begins with H and ends in onky. And I was only going to use it for illustrative purposes. But I think even that's a bit taboo. Whereas most white people go, well, that doesn't really, that's just a kind of, that sounds quite funny, because there's no backstory. So I do understand that difference. I think most people do. I heard Fraser Myers, who we had on the programme yesterday. I heard him this morning elsewhere, actually making a similar point. However, this is clearly a bit of a dodgy creature that pitched up out of that cab. Her and her partner, somebody had vomited all over this bloke's cab, who she referred to later as a dodgy C word. Mind you, it might have been an Uber, so who knows? No, I'm taking no sides on this. So I mean, it was a drunken person being not pleasant and saying all sorts of horrible things and calling a police officer an effing stupid and white. I'm sorry, that surely comes under the category that even allowing for the lack of the same power or resonance or history of racial abuse. We all get that, we all understand that. It doesn't mean to say there is no such thing as any kind of racial abuse. That was clear cut, right? That was clear cut. And then she went on to explain it by suggesting that it was him who was the problem, the copper, because she believed it was him using his power and privilege over her. Well, it's a copper, for God's sake. She broke the law at that point, as far as the copper was concerned. So she was arrested for the criminal damage. I don't know what happened to that particular case, but... and then he said, I further arrest you for racially aggravated harassment. And then she hit the I think she swore at him again after that as well. But it was his power and privilege over her. There was something about her, because she was a non-white woman, that enabled him to do that. I mean, as if police stations up and down the country aren't full on a regular basis of coppers dealing with drunk half-wits who shout all manner of things out and also get further arrested for aggravated, assault or language or Section 5, Section 4, whatever it is. All of these different things happens on a daily basis in this country. So don't play that card, Kerr, because that ain't going to work. That's just a nonsense. But, you got away with it, mate. You got away with it. You managed to convince a jury that your bizarre, stupid, anti-intellectual position of whiteness and power and privilege was a thing, and the jury said you're not guilty. So democracy, kids. What do you make of that? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Because at the end of the day, apparently it says that now 15% of the total number of people behind bars are people who have been sent back in after they've been released. So there's clearly a problem, and you've always said this, Vanessa, with what happens when they're in there as well, because what they're not being encouraged to do is figure out how to stay away.
I can't say this enough. The bigger picture is how our prison system has been run into and our justice system, for that matter, has been run into the ground.
Yeah, right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There you go. If you want to be heard on the radio, you have to plug your own microphone in. We used to have people that did this stuff. Now I have to do it myself. Once in a while, 2 days on the trot, I've messed up. Once with the headphones, now with the microphone. We got the voice of doom. That's what I was actually saying before I realised nobody could hear me. The voice of doom. Is this day 2? I think it's day 2. It's a new voice of doom. I don't know the answer myself. It's the political mystery voice thing. Political mystery voice bit. Have a listen if you could tell us who you think this is.
I think it would be very difficult.
Any ideas? Remember, it's a political mystery voice. Don't call in because there is no prize, but you can message in if you fancy having a crack at this. 87222. Here's the voice again.
I think it would be very difficult.
Usual T's and C's. If we get a right answer, we'll tell you who it is on the other side of the news in the next 10 minutes if we get a right answer. If we don't, it rolls over till tomorrow. Here's the voice again.
I think it would be very difficult.
I have no idea who that guy. I'm tempted to, that could be a generic cabinet minister. It might be somebody very famous. I'm guessing it probably is somebody quite famous. Can we have one more listen, Amy?
I think it would be very difficult.
87222. Will we reveal all on the other side of the news? Find out. Let's go over here to Dennis down in London. Dennis, what have you got for us? Hi.
Great show as always. I'm really hacked off about this. I don't care whether she's black or white, but as you quite rightly said, if that had been a white person recriminating with a black officer, can you imagine the furore that would be? But what I'm really hacked off about is nobody's talking about the poor cab driver. She's puked up in his car. To get that properly clean, that's going to cost him between 200 and 250 quid, and he'll lose a day's work over it.
Yeah. I wonder. I was about to say, go on, carry on, Dennis. I'll come back in a second.
And as it's already been said, she's got plenty of money. Good luck for her. That cab driver probably works 12 hours a day and gets probably not much more than minimum wage. It's a disgrace.
A cab driver who she described as a dodgy C word, which is very nice.
Yeah, well, the argument always is he's just the driver. I run a chauffeur business.
So, you know what it costs to clean up a mucky cab if somebody throws a whitey.
Fortunately, that doesn't happen with us very often. But if that's one of my vehicles off the road, we charge the client 500 quid for the pleasure.
Yeah. Spot on.
It's a disgrace.
All I can wonder is, bearing in mind this court case ended up only talking about the racially aggravated bit and nothing about the kind of a criminal... I wonder whether she settled that. Maybe there was a previous case. I don't know. I'll try and look into that. Maybe in the cold light of day she went, yeah, we better pay the cab driver. I don't know. And threw him 500 quid. Who knows?
It probably wouldn't even enter her head.
Well, not judging by the kind of character.
If she's that foul-mouthed and rude, I don't even know who she is. I don't follow football and I don't really care. But that type of individual, I know what I'd do. But anyway, great show. Enjoy your day.
Thank you very much. Have a good one. Thank you, Dennis. Football Australia said it acknowledged the pressures the matter had placed on everyone involved. They say Football Australia will reflect with Sam on learning from this matter. We look forward to Sam's return to the pitch and her continued contributions to both her club and the Matildas on the world stage. And, you know, she's a very high-profile female footballer for Chelsea and for her national team, for Australia. So, yeah, I'm sure they will. It's a not guilty verdict, so they're not going to... She can't be punished further, but they're going to acknowledge and look back at it. I thought it was interesting that she said she regretted the way she expressed herself, but added, I feel the message is still relevant. So the message is still relevant. So she's maintaining that there is this kind of white power and privilege apparatus that still exists. By the way, it's an argument anyone can create this. You can create it on class, really convincingly on class, actually. More so than you can, I think, with colour. You simply very neatly and articulately lay out the argument that, you know, why would a posh run Etonian Oxbridge establishment give me, a working class oik, a fair hearing or a fair crack at the whip or a fair anything in life? It's very easy to talk about ruling classes. Of course, then you throw another spanner in the works. I'm surprised she didn't say homophobic as well. She didn't quite go there. But she talked about his power and privilege. I mean, he's a police officer, by the way, dealing with a drunk moron. So I think the idea that he used, and I don't even think when you hear the clip, you'd even say it was anything but a very reasonable police officer. I'm sure there's many police officers saying, I wouldn't have been that reasonable with somebody like that standing here or sitting here in the custody suite. I'd have been slightly more robust in my approach. But he was very decent, very polite. She was having none of it. It was his power and privilege. If you've been nicked and you're in a cop shop, there is a power shift, all right, for anyone, whether you're male, female, gay, straight, black, white, trans, doesn't matter, anything. Of course, at that point, you've relinquished a certain amount of power because you've potentially broken the law. 0344 499 1000. We're going to take a bit of pause for some news. Let's have another listen to the voice of doom.
I think it would be very difficult.
Oh, I thought I had the voice in my... I thought I knew who it was there for a second. If you think you know, you can't call in, but you can message 87222. First, let's get the latest headlines at 3.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the programme. Welcome back to the home of common sense. We've got a lot of stuff going on here. Palestinian migrants who applied through a scheme meant for Ukrainian refugees have been granted the right to live in the UK. This is an extraordinary decision, but it all came back to, you've guessed it, the European Court of Human Rights, for it was on that basis that the judge said, oh, all right, then, of course you can stay. We'll take a look at that and continue to take your calls on that question. Should there simply be a very straightforward ban on refugees from Gaza? Remember, Egypt, Jordan and other countries in the area have employed such a policy, overtly or otherwise. We'll have more on that throughout the course of this hour. Also, rule changes now give drivers more time to pay parking tickets after one woman was fined nearly £2,000 due to a poor phone signal that prevented her from paying for her parking. This happens a lot, it seems, of you being collared by the old lack of 4 or 5G ruse, because that's what's going on here. And a group of left-wing MPs are pushing ministers to introduce a 4-day working week as part of the government's overhaul of workers' rights. Interesting times. What could possibly go wrong? I guess that depends on the job you do. Our lines are open. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Should we do the Voice of Doom? Have we got a winner on the Voice of Doom? There is the big question. Let me just remind you of the current mystery voice. Here it is.
I think it would be very difficult.
Who is that? These were some of the guesses. Adam Bolton, it is not. Jeremy Corbyn, nah. Ian Duncan Smith, nope. David Owen, no. Rupert Lowe, it isn't. Neither is it Lord Heseltine. But Stephen Kinnock, no, it isn't. Can we hear the voice again, Amy?
I think it would be very difficult.
We don't have a winner. We still don't have a winner. It's a rollover, kids. How exciting is that? Forget money you could win. This is, I'm telling you, this is the rollover of all rollovers. Tomorrow it returns for day 3. Will we get a winner? Stand by. Now, private parking companies have committed to ending penalties for drivers who take too long to pay. The change comes after one woman, as I was just talking about, was fined nearly £2,000 when a poor phone signal prevented her from paying at the car park in Derby. She gave it a go. It didn't happen. She couldn't get the signal, so it was moments sometime later before she could. Rosie Hudson had her case eventually dropped, but private parking companies issued over 41,000 daily tickets, costing motorists £4.1 million per day. There's a lot of money to be had in this. Let's speak with Barry Siegel, UK's leading parking ticket expert, founder of AppealNow.com. Afternoon to you, Barry.
Good afternoon.
Always good to have you on. Do you ever think, instead of going into this sort of parking appeal area of life, you wish you'd gone into parking tickets instead? Because whilst I know you're normally in Barbados sunning yourself with your huge millions, Barry, but there would have been a lot of money to be earned from owning a car park.
Well, it is like having your own mint and printing your own fivers, you know, or tenors, depends.
Indeed.
But I have to say, this whole thing made me laugh because the private parking companies are patting themselves on the back for as though they'd discovered the cure for the common cold. This is so ridiculous, and it's only because they're so avaricious that they charge people after they find difficulty in actually paying for their parking. It's bonkers.
It's absolutely bonkers. And of course, what these particular areas seem to come down to is that you're asked, so, I mean, lots of places now you can't even see a parking machine there. You just have to use an app. They kind of went by instalments, Barry, didn't they? You know, sometimes there was a parking machine, but you still had to, you could only pay by card. And now the machines altogether seem to have disappeared in many car parks, which puts you at the mercy of an app. And if your phone ain't working or your signal's bad, you're stuffed.
You certainly are. And stuff like a kipper, I would suggest.
Yeah.
The point is that the private parking companies have run roughshod over the motoring public for years and years and years.
And it's astonishing to me that the various governments have not imposed a system of parking appeals and representations exactly like the ones that have worked for 30 plus years for local authorities. The appeal process, for example, going to a tribunal, is, in my view, unfair because, as far as I'm aware, with private parking companies, you can't appeal to an adjudicator in person. You have to do it only on the basis of paperwork.
Yeah.
Now, the tribunals that have been set up for local authority appeals have worked tremendously well. You have some extremely competent and knowledgeable adjudicators who act fairly and without bias, and this has been running for years and years. Why this can't apply to private parking, I just don't know.
It does seem extraordinary that when they got the gig, you know, those contracts, which I imagine are rather delicious for parking companies, that they would, you might think, you know, that would have been part of the criteria, that you've got to have all of this stuff in place. What we were doing before, you've got to have all of that and maybe then some. But apparently not. You know, these licences were handed out in the same way that, you know, people who could manufacture COVID masks seem to get jobs.
Well, I don't know how the contracts were actually handed out. What is clear that private parking companies actually contract with a company, for example, a shopping mall, to, how should I say, organise the parking. And the problem is that, in my view, and over 21 years of experience, this has been unfair.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating for the motorist, and I get lots and lots of emails from people who are absolutely at their wits' end because they get documents which appear to be court documents, where in fact they're just formal requests for parking fines.
Sure. And that's all they are. This business of what they've done now, are they extending the amount of time then in order for you to pay?
Well, they're just giving you sort of 5 minutes or so to actually pay or notify them that your car is in the car park. It's not clear at all. Local authorities have a statutory duty to act fairly, and there have been many, many cases where parking tickets have been issued within 2 or 3 minutes, and the adjudicators have said, look, this isn't fair. You've got to give the person time to get the voucher from the parking meter, or actually to make contact with the online parking system.
Indeed. You wouldn't think that would be too much to ask. And, you know, I made this point earlier, Barry, even if they said, right, you've got 15 minutes, because most of those car parks, those big car parks, it's not as if you could take the mickey and do much in 15 minutes anyway. You know, you're not going to go for a day's shopping in 15 minutes. You're hardly going to walk to the supermarket. Many of them are still a walk away from the railway station or wherever it happens to be. So I would have thought 15 minutes would be reasonable.
I would have thought so. And I was speaking the other day to somebody who said that in the car park that he uses, the private car park, you can't get a signal in the car park. You have to go out of the car park to actually get the signal and then come back to your car and do whatever you have to do. It's just crazy.
You can't make it up. Listen, Barry, always good to speak. You're looking well, sir. Great to have you on. Barry Siegel is the UK's leading parking ticket expert, founder of appealnow.com. Thank you to him. We were hoping to speak to Rosie Hudson, who was the woman that was originally fined £2,000. That's what it mounted up to. Because of a poor phone signal, she wasn't able to make the payment within the allotted time, so they gave her a ticket. She said, no, I tried, I couldn't get a signal. Unfortunately, we can't get in touch with her, so I'm assuming she still can't get a flipping signal. I would say maybe change your phone provider, Rosie. Maybe that's the idea. If we get hold of her, we will talk to her, but it's looking iffy on the phone signal department. If you've been there, experienced it, and sadly got the grim T-shirt of ticket doom, I'm all ears at this end. Derek's in Hull on this point. Derek, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian.
Hiya.
I like your programme. Yes.
Thank you.
I wonder if, I'd like to share an experience recently had at a car park in Harlyn Bay in Cornwall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to use a phone app at this car park. No signal. The car park was cameraed, so it takes your number when you drive in and out.
I know the ones, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually went and paid and bought a ticket for 3 hours. A week after I returned home to Hull, I get a parking fine through for £60.
Right.
If I don't pay it within 7 days, it goes up to 170.
Nice.
And if I refuse to pay after that, it gets passed on to a debt collecting company. I disposed of the ticket I bought 1 week after I got back. He actually charged me from when I walked from the car to the machine, which took approximately 2 minutes. And apparently, I investigated this. It's catching a lot of people out, this. The charge from walking from the car to the machine, and then also when they return to the vehicle, from getting in the vehicle to leaving the car park.
So you went over the 3 hours?
I actually left early. I bought a 3-hour ticket. I left after an hour and a half.
Right.
But because it took me approximately 2 minutes to walk from the car to pay to get a ticket from the machine, he said I'd overstayed.
Oh, I see. So you hadn't... So you put your number plate, do you, in the machine when you buy a ticket?
Yeah, that's right. But
so they knew it was you, and the camera said you'd arrived and hadn't paid in that 2 minutes, even though you were walking to the machine?
That's right, yeah.
Wow. What happened?
Well, I decided to pay the parking, the £60, so I wouldn't have to pay 170.
Yeah.
But apparently, when it's a private car parking, you've got no redress. You're assumed to be guilty.
I mean, you might think they would be able to still, through their own database, to go, oh, yeah, there was a payment for that vehicle, or something like that. And they might be able to see through their own cameras that you clearly walked from car to machine. I mean, that's bonkers, right?
Yeah, if you go online and Google All-in Bay Car Park, you'll get some real horror stories about what's happening down there with this Alliance Parking Company.
I wonder if it was the same. I was in Cornwall and had a problem. You know when you, just to add to the woes, Derek, you know when you don't even have the app, so you've got to download the app to start with. And then you've got to put in your, before Apple Pay and things like that, you've got to put in your card details in a place with no signal. And then, of course, it says refresh the page and you've got to start again and you go for your name, your address, which vehicle you're going to park. And they're not always that straightforward. Some are really straightforward, and I'm grateful for those companies that make it a little easier.
Yeah. To be honest, I've never had much problem. I find them quite good, actually. Another thing I'd like to point out, that what people who have clicked onto this, what they're actually doing now at this car park, they're actually parking outside the car park, going in to buy a ticket or using the app, and then driving in after they've paid.
To avoid this problem?
To avoid, being picked up on the camera, entering and leaving, to avoid this problem.
Wow. I mean, that's extraordinary. Listen, Derek, I'm sorry you had to pay, but I understand your thinking on that, because you and thank you for your call. You get into that territory, there you go, well, OK, I paid, but if I don't pay this, then it's going to be 170 quid, and then I've got to go through can I really be bothered to go through the process? It might be easier and less stress, because I know I'm going to be speaking to call centres or machines or emails or some virtual assistant on their web where I'm trying to get an answer, and I haven't got 4 hours before I go to work to do all of that. And that's the bit, isn't it? That's literally the bit. I've been thinking all day, I've got to phone this is just an example, I've got to phone my mobile phone company, who I've just joined. Literally, it crossed over today. And I've got to phone them. And they're very nice. That's why I changed. But I know that I'm going to jump through hoops to explain the questions, even to get to the point and the security. We're going to check your security. What number? We're going to send you a text with a 4-digit code on it. Can you repeat the code back to? I've got to go through all of that faff, and that's not for a bad reason. I'm calling them for a good reason. But they've kind of elongated. Well, it used to ring a number and somebody would pick it up the other end and say, "Hello, Samuel Acme Empire of Joy. How can I help you? Oh, hello. Nice to speak to you, Roger. Can you help me out with my And that was it. Away you went. Justin is in Wakefield. What's going on in Wakefield, Justin? Good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian. Just a quick one. I'll be very quick. Some time ago, I was parking outside my flat. Now, my flat's got its own multi-storey car park. because it's quite awkward. It's in the middle of waiting for the next train station. And I came back after putting my shopping into my flat, literally 5-10 minutes later, and there was a bright yellow sticker, penalty notice on the front of my car. And I got in contact with the company that was actually in charge of this, and they said, OK, not a problem, we'll cancel that. 6 years later, 5 years, and just about, 5 years and nearly 6 years, they sent me a CCJ. I couldn't fight against, because it was literally a day before the I can't explain it. Before it runs out, you've got no comeback on it.
So 5 years after they agreed, sorry, our mistake, blah blah blah, and then half a decade later they send you a legal notice.
Yes.
To pay the ticket.
Well, basically, I got a ticket. It didn't even have my name on it. It was just put into my letterbox, and it says you need to pay £500 immediately, or you're going to have a CCJ against your name. Well, it was actually from the court saying that I've got this and I've got to pay this fine.
Wow.
So I got in touch with the court. I paid the fine there and then, and I said, right, can I appeal this? And they went, no.
Really?
Yeah, because it was literally a day. Because what these companies have started doing is there's some sort of statute of limitations. If it's 12 to 5 years and 1 day off 6 years, there's nothing you can do. You've got to pay it, otherwise you end up with a CCJ and a court appearance.
And there's no way around it, or no easy way, without hiring a 30 grand a day lawyer.
Yeah, but you can't even appeal because it's too late to appeal.
I mean, that sounds all shades of fishy, doesn't it? Man alive. Listen, Justin, I'm sorry again. It's another one of those areas when we're bamboozled with bureaucracy and it's got a legal component to it, and someone's going, yeah, you're going to get this happen to you, we're going to double it, and we're going to the bailiffs are coming round. You'll be sitting at home, watching Strictly, they'll take your 72-inch flat screen away. You've got all of that stuff. You think, well, this sounds a bit iffy. CCJs, I don't want one of those things, not quite sure what they are, but they sound terrible. I'll just pay it. It's 500 quid. No. Because you'd have to get a lawyer of some sort. These people employ all sorts of devilish methods in order to trouser your money. Have you been on the receiving end? 0344 499 1000. Back with more of your calls coming next, right here on Talk.
Because at the end of the day, apparently it says that now 15% of the total number of people behind bars are people who have been sent back in after they've been released. So there's clearly a problem, and you've always said this, Vanessa, with what happens when they're in there as well, because what they're not being encouraged to do is figure out how to stay away.
I can't say this enough. The bigger picture is how our prison system has been run into and our justice system for that matter, has been run into the ground.
Yeah, right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Simon in Devon, who says, where I live in Devon, all of the car park ticket machines are powered by a single solar panel on top of them. And you guessed it, when the sun hasn't shone for a few days, the cars in the car park all have parking tickets on the windshields. Constant problem. Sandra in Cumbria says, a few years ago when I was in Devon again, and my husband and I wanted to park, but the car park was full, so decided to find another car park, but got a fine for not paying. So you went in the car park. Yeah, it does that, doesn't it? Because it films you going in and then coming out again. That's right, it's bizarre, very authoritarian sort of disturbing technology, isn't it, for a car park? If you think about what you're dealing with here, parking your car, not abandoning a child or something. You're parking your car. They film you going in, film you going out. If you drive around for too long, then you're seen as somebody who enjoyed the space. Sandra in Cumbria, sorry, that was Sandra. This is Chris. Car parks that only use an app are discriminatory to older people. The elderly regularly don't have a smartphone, and if they do, they don't necessarily know how to use it. It's bad enough making you use your card, which again, the elderly regularly don't like using, by forcing people to use an app and possibly sell their own data. It's just not right. I was just looking at my phone here. These are parking apps, okay? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 parking apps on my phone. There are more, of course. I haven't got those because I like parking apps. I've got those because they're the ones I've had to use over the course of time, because you can't pay without the parking app. So you end up with this collection of parking apps, and away you go. I think there's one no longer in existence. This is Darren in Milton Keynes. What have you got, Darren? Good afternoon.
Yeah, Ian, pleasure to speak to you, my friend.
You too.
Thank you. We spoke 2-3 years back about, I said bangers and mash and you laughed, which was really funny. Anyway,
bangers and mash is always funny, isn't it?
Well, it was when I said it, yeah, not normally. Ian, what it is, PCN, okay, you get parking charge notice and penalty charge notice. Both the same initials mean very different things.
Yes.
So to give you an example, a council-owned car park will have a penalty charge notice if you overstay or etc. That one is very difficult to get out of. Unless procedure's not been followed, the lines aren't marked correctly, they're the wrong size lines, etc. It's hard to get out of it.
Yeah.
But parking charge notice is contract law. That's a different kettle of fish. So you're entering into a contract. Now those signs up on the all around the car park that say by parking here you're entering into a contract. That's not quite true, because to enter into a contract, you have to sign something, and you haven't signed anything. So, but then they send you a letter saying, right, you owe us this much, but actually it's an offer to pay. They're saying, do you want to pay us this? But because of the way it's worded, because of all the red ink on the page and everything else, they're trying to scare you. Scare the people, control the people. So if it says parking charge notice, you don't have to pay it. But what you do have to do, because there was a case, a fish and chip shop owner down in Essex somewhere, I think it was, back in 2015, he took Parking Eye to court. It's one of these companies, and he lost the case, and they use that as a test case now. So you cannot now ignore them, because they can take you to court. They don't often take you to court, but they can for up to 6 years.
Wow.
So what you need to do is you need to write them a letter send it special delivery, have proof of delivery, and keep that for 6 years. And in the letter, you tell them that thank you for your offer of contract. I don't wish to enter into contract with you, and you haven't got a photograph of my face, so I'm not going to pay your fine. And any more response after this that you want from me, I don't work for free, so I'm going to charge you £100 for my time. For every letter that I reply to you, is going to cost you £100. Once you've done that and you've got proof of sending it, you keep the proof for 6 years. There's nothing they can do. If they do actually try to pursue it, and they keep, which they will keep sending you letters, and they'll get progressively worse, and then the solicitors will start sending you letters, which is the same owners of the company normally anyway, just a different department and different headed letters, and just ignore them, and it's costing them at least 80 pence to a pound every letter they send to you, because they have to pay the postage.
That's true.
So it's costing them, and it costs you nothing. Now, I wouldn't advise you to do this, but if you took that letter and you put it back in the post box, it would come back to you, and that would cost them another 85 or a pound, whatever it is. And you could keep doing that for all the letters they sent you, and it would cost them thousands. And if we all did that, they would be out of business. But I'm not saying you should do that.
No, because
terrible.
There is that, you see, I love this thinking that you've got on this one, Darren, but do you think there is a danger that they might pass it over to a debt collector?
Well, like, a debt collector can't do anything because you're not entering into contract. You've told them you don't agree with their contract and don't want to enter into their contract. Yeah. And it's not a legally binding contract. Well, how they get the money is because they scare you. And when people are scared, they do things because, I just want it to go away. If I pay the £60, and if I pay now, I can pay half price, and the problem goes away. They scare you. Do not be scared. If it says parking charge notice, just send them a letter, as I've said, and then every letter they send you, you could just laugh at it and put it to one side, but don't keep putting it back in the post box and getting it sent back to you, because that's going to cost them £1 every time.
And we don't want these poor people to suffer. You know, they're not going to be able to eat at night, are they? They've got kids to feed and stuff. Listen, it's a great call. Darren, thank you very much. That's Darren in Milton Keynes. Let's get a voice note on parking vines. This comes from Lash.
I drove past the McDonald's on my way to the office once, and drove past the McDonald's on the way back from my office, and I got a fine that I'd been parked in the McDonald's car park for 8 hours. My wife wondered, what on earth were you doing in McDonald's for 8 hours? I only drove past. It caught me from the street. It took me ages to get a refund. It's ridiculous.
That is, yeah, I guess the camera was just tilted slightly in the wrong position, copying drivers driving past. An 8-hour stay in Mackie D. I mean, you wouldn't be there for, you're in and out like a robber's dog invariably in those places, aren't you? It is rather interesting. There's a couple of, have you ever been to there's one near me, that if you go into any of the shops in a certain parade, there's a parade of shops, so you don't pay to park there, but if you're using one of the shops, but you have to scan the QR code and then register your number plate. Some of the shops have got a little device that you can put your number plate in. If you don't do that, then you'll get a fine. And you think, that's bizarre. It is very near a railway station, so I can absolutely imagine lots of people were going, I'm just going to park there all day. That's very, very easy. So I kind of get that a little bit, and that's quite fair, really, because they're not saying you can't park here. They're saying, you can do whatever you like. It's the kind of sentence that deserves a bit of music behind me, isn't it? Just like you heard. Nothing wrong with that. That's how dramatic that story is. Thanks, Amy. You're great. 0344 499 1000. We'll have more comment from you on the way in just a couple of moments. I want to continue to remind you there's a chance to win some good money. Some cold, hard cash could be yours. Time to find out how you could be in with a chance to win £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Here's an interesting one from Charles in Sheffield, who says, I've got a company right now chasing me for a fine of £145 from 4 years ago. I have a record of my payment for the trip to a pub on my phone. They got in touch 6 months ago and I got in touch and told them not to waste their time. Phone calls followed and I just told them to disappear and they could take me to court if they wanted to or cancel it. Still they persist, but it will cost them when I win. And there's a lovely thing, isn't there, in life when you absolutely know you're in the right. There's no grey area. It's not like I think I might be on safe ground here. You literally got the proof that you're in the right. And you're going to turn up in court. And what will probably happen in a case like that, whatever court, I doubt whether it will get there, Charles, but if it did get to a court, then before you even got in the courtroom, their lawyer will look at you and you'll go, sorry, have you seen and they'll go, okay, and they'll go into court and they'll say, we have no evidence. We offer no case against this man. And it's dropped. Everybody's absolute waste of money and time. Good luck with it, Charles. Do let us know what happens if you do eventually end up in front of the beak. I actually went to almost the first and only time I went to, I say almost because there's another story there, but that's for another day. But the first time I ever ended up in a magistrate's court was in Ashford in Kent over a parking ticket. When I'd been given the ticket on the car, went to the shops, parked somewhere, probably shouldn't have parked. I got a ticket saying, shouldn't park here. We've taken your details and your number. So if you park here again, you will get a ticket. And that's what it said. And then, I don't know, 2-3 months later, I get a parking ticket. I thought, well, that's not what happened. It says just pay this now or go to court. And I thought, I'm going to court. And I went to court and as far as I remember, I still got fined. I just didn't have any lawyer there or anything. It was just me standing there on my toilet. I think they thought, who's this strange guy who's got something to say about things? I told them the story and said, no, you know, I was told I might get a fine, so I don't think I should pay it. And I think at the end of it, they just said, yeah, it's they did. That's right. It was like £50 instead of 25 and £20 costs or something bizarre like that. I mean, a lawyer would have... I didn't have the ticket, unfortunately, that said, you know, we've taken your number. But, you know, I gave it a bit of a go in the name of justice. Didn't quite work out. Now this story. A dozen Labour MPs want ministers to consider a 4-day working week in workers' rights reforms. They back an amendment to the Employment Rights Bill, which also proposes flexible working rights and banning exploitative zero-hour contracts. It comes as Labour's Borders watchdog Pick suggests he may work part-time in Finland. Wow, that's not bad work if you can get it, right? Let's speak to Joe Ryle, Director of the 4-Day Week campaign, former Labour advisor and director. Joe, good afternoon to you.
Hiya, how are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Not speaking to us from Finland or Barbados or anywhere like that, but well entrenched at home. Good to have you with us. Look, the 4-Day Week discussion's hardly a new one. I mean, there's lots of companies been doing it. As you will be more aware than me, Joe, even pre-COVID, there were lots of companies already kind of going in this direction. But having it fixed in law, what's the detail of this, and why would it be a good idea to make it a legal thing rather than just the option of a company?
Yeah. So what this amendment actually does is set up a working time council. So it's not kind of mandating a legal 4-day week for everyone across the economy. It would set up a working time council, which would be made up of businesses, trade unions, employment experts, and also government ministers, to explore and make recommendations as for how a 4-day working, how we could essentially start transitioning from a 5-day working week to a 4-day working week across the economy. Because as you say, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of companies that have been able to make it work in, you know, vastly different sectors of the economy. And so what this amendment would do is say, well, how can we, if this is the direction of travel, this is the future of work we're heading towards, how can we kind of implement this more widely across the economy?
Yeah. What happens if, you know, because obviously there's some jobs that you can't work from home, we all know that. Those people may well say, hang on, I'm living in an unequal world where others are working. People will say, well, you've got a different kind of job, that's your deal with your employer. But what about those that work in similar kind of organisations? You know, this has got to be one size fits all or not, hasn't it? Because you are going to end up with, I'm already hearing rumblings in HR departments about, but I want the Friday off, not the Wednesday. I want the Monday off, not the Wednesday. I'm sure you're familiar with this as well, Joe. So it's not straightforward, this, is it? There are potential ramifications, even for supporters of the 4-day week.
I mean, you're right, you know, and that is kind of why we do need this working time council, you know, because that would be working with industry experts to say, well, how can we make this a reality in this sector? And, you know, we've never said a 4-day working week is going to come in overnight. You know, if you look at the history of working time reduction, it was 100 years ago we moved from a 6-day week to a 5-day week. It took about 2 decades. And so it's going to take time to get there. In some sectors, it might be a more gradual reduction of working hours. But, we have found, to our surprise, you know, actually working with various different companies in kind of manufacturing, retail, hospitality, finance, you know, that different companies and different have managed to make it work. So it is possible in various different sectors. But, you know, if there's no kind of coordination at a national level, then it's more likely that some might end up getting the benefit and others won't. So I think that's why we need this working time council to explore this.
Why do we need 4-day weeks at all? Many will ask that question and say, well, hang on, we've been doing it wonderfully for 5 days. We've got a weekend at the end of it. It's kind of more or less pans out if you think of, you know, the average company, if there is such a thing. But, you know, the job that needs doing, what it takes to do it, how much input's required to make it successful. 5 days, jobs are good.
Well, you know, this 9 to 5, 5-day working week, I would argue, is no longer suits the realities of modern life. You know, we've got huge technology that's come in that has made workers more productive over the last few decades, but we're still working a really similar amount of working hours as we were in the 1980s. So we do think it's time for change. You know, and it is exciting that the UK is leading the way on this. You know, there's hundreds of companies that have shown it can work, and it is vastly popular, you know, across the UK. You know, most people can see, I think, that working 4 days out of 7 is a much better balance than 5 days of 7. You know, particularly if you're a parent, you've got childcare responsibilities, whatever you've got going on in your life, you know, it's a much better balance. And I guess the other key part of this is that what the results show so far for those companies that have done it is when you are working less days, so 4 days rather than 5, you're better rested, you have a better balance, but you're also able to then perform better in your job. You know, you work more efficiently, effectively, and we avoid things like burnout, which are not good for workers or for the economy.
There it is. Listen, Joe, thank you for your time. Good luck with it all. Joe Ryle, director of the 4-Day Week campaign, former Labour advisor as well. You know, I'm quite relaxed about this. I know a lot of people get very out of 4 days outrageous. Well, it would be outrageous in some jobs. In fact, it would be almost criminal in some jobs. But in others, I mean, if you can cop a 4-day week, you'd take it, wouldn't you? The worry becomes when you have the public purse at stake. So it's the civil service. And I know, you know, it's a very sort of open goal with the civil service to, you know, have a pop, and rightly so in many respects. Why would they, at taxpayers' expense, get paid the same money for doing just 4 days? Because that's the argument, by the way. It's not like 4 days, you just don't get paid for the 5th. The argument is you would get paid the same. Does the company then have to, or civil service, whoever it is, have to then find somebody for the 5th day? I'd have thought they'd probably have to get that covered in most areas. Certainly if you were working in hospitality, that would be an area where there would be an obvious huge expense. Putting this into law, it's a bit like the banning the 0-hour contracts, which I know can be iffy for some people, but they can also be an absolute delight and the greatest form of flexibility to others. So you've got to be careful about legislating on this stuff rather than saying, you know, I think employer and employee can work this out between them. And if you work for a company that's not going to offer you what you want, or you see a job advertised, you don't go for it. But if it's one that can give you the flexibility you need, then fine. Everyone's happy with it. So I kind of get it that times do change. You know, I feel strongly about the schooling system at the moment because my kids at school and stuff, and one of them's just really a year and a bit in. The one-size-fits-all model for schools is, the more you think about it, the greater nonsense that is. I mean, it's just bizarre and quite destructive to the mindset of some kids. And I know we can always throw the old traditional, well, we did it for years and it didn't hurt us, and that's maybe true. It's a lot of things we didn't know years ago, but things do change. So I understand that. And if you're in a job where you only have to do 4 days and it pays you the money you want, I'm very, very happy for you. But it would be very bizarre in my world that I mean, there are people in my work. Julia does 4 days a week. What am I talking about? Julia does. But she does that because she has to go and see the nurse, of course, 1 day a week for her special, almost, it's like kind of like a rehab, a resetting of her mindset so that she's ready to go full throttle by the full Monday morning. That's what it is. It's kind of like an athlete taking time to get back in the game. So yeah, if you can if that's your deal and you're happy with it and it works for everybody, I don't think it's for anybody else to have a view, unless you're working for government positions that are paying good wages, and then they have to fill the gap on the Friday that you're not there. And then you get into that territory of, and I've heard the apparently roaring arguments about the whole business of which day off you have. I mean, let's be honest, everyone wants a Monday or a Friday, don't they? 'Cause you get for a long weekend. Who wants a Tuesday? Well, you've got to come back on the Monday and then off again on the Tuesday. It's no use to me at all. I've heard people say, by the way, who get the 5th day off, that it's not as great as you tend to put everything into. I'll go to the dentist that day. You don't feel like it's not like an extension of the weekend. The kids are still at school, so it goes, yeah. I mean, for some it's better than going to work. So yeah, if you make it work, fine. It's kind of interesting to see how those people that want the Monday and the Friday off, or the Friday, react. I think some people get both as well. Quite a lot of places get it's not even 4 days, it's 3 days, working from home rather than the working week. I know that's slightly different, but there's clear connotations in both. 03, what's the number? 0344 499 1000 or 87222 if you're sending us a message. Gary is in St Helens. Back to where we began the programme. Should there be a total ban on refugees from Gaza? Reference that curious story of the family using the Ukrainian system to get some kind of residency or place in the UK. What are your thoughts, Gary? Good afternoon.
Hello, mate. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Good as gold at this end. What are you thinking?
No, it just reminds me of the old adage. The one thing we learn from history is we don't learn from history. I mean, when we consider what the Jordanians did on Black September, what the Kuwaitis did after the Kuwaiti War, and then what the Egyptians have done for building the wall even bigger and wider, or higher, I should say. And yet somebody in our country has had the bright idea that it's a good idea to invite them in. I obviously have concerns. Excuse me. I have granddaughters, I have daughters. And I see what's going on, and yet we're going to invite this kind of radical thinking. That's what the other countries kicked them out for, of radicalism, which I just can't get my head around.
I mean, you'd think the judge would say, OK, I've got lots of things to consider here, and one of them would be, who are these people? Yeah. Because the judge doesn't know anything about them. Where are they coming from? They're coming from a place where there's a massive affiliation to Hamas, which is a recognised terrorist organisation. That in itself would be the point where the judge would go, well, this goes no further now. We've got to stop.
You would think so. And I mean, certainly with them being sort of refugees, I mean, when I consider when people look at sort of what happened in Ukraine with obviously Poland, now they brought in millions that people don't seem to talk about, millions of refugees from the Ukraine into Poland, and they integrated no problem. Yeah. I mean, I have a Polish next-door neighbour. I get on great when I've been to Poland, beautiful country, great people. And the Ukrainians had no issues, and yet you look at the problems we have in Britain.
We shouldn't be having these kind of imported problems, you know? I mean, it's just... It's quite easy, isn't it? It's not even hard to work it out. Yes, we want to be kind, of course. Anyone with a brain wants to say, look, if somebody is in desperate need, we did it with Ukraine, Hong Kong, did it after the war in this country, we've done it with Afghanistan, and people who worked, alongside British military during the Afghan war. It's not as if we don't acknowledge the need to help people, but you have to have a sensible line in the sand where you say, well, that's clearly a case where we wouldn't get involved. We wouldn't get involved. Listen, great call. Gary, thank you very much indeed for that. Back to parking fines. Michelle says, on parking fines, I took my mum, who's got a disabled badge, to a shopping centre in West Bromwich. It said free parking with a disabled badge. I parked up, put the badge on the car. A week later, got a parking ticket for 60 quid and a photo of my car and the reg. I appealed the charge and sent proof of the disabled badge. They said because I didn't walk through the shopping centre to a place and register the car and I'd got my disabled badge, I still got to pay or they would double the fine. So I paid it, but it's so wrong when it said disabled was free to park. Crooks, says Michelle in the West Midlands. Spot on, because what do you take from that? You're driving a car into a car park, you've got a disabled badge where mostly, not exclusively, but mostly you can park without payment. Free to park if you're disabled. You wouldn't start to go into the small print at that point and go, I better check if I've then got to still register. Unless that's a common thing with disabled badges. I don't think it is. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
Because at the end of the day, apparently it says that now 15% of the total number of people behind bars are people who have been sent back in after they've been released. So there's clearly a problem, and you've always said this, Vanessa, with what happens when they're in there as well, because what they're not being encouraged to do is figure out how to stay away.
I can't say this enough. The bigger picture is how our prison system has been run into and our justice system, for that matter, has been run into the ground.
Yeah, right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Some breaking news. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has told the families of those killed in the Nottingham attacks that a judge-led public inquiry will take place in a matter of weeks. There is a very real sense, I suppose, that somebody in number 10 is saying, Starmer, you need to start reading the room, mate. You need to start looking at where people need. I mean, each case of destruction of people's lives and the killing of people and children, as we've seen lately, should always be thoroughly investigated. In whatever form that takes, should always be thoroughly investigated. What we keep seeing, bad, as terrible as it is that fellow humans among us do terrible things to each other and take the lives of people and devastate families. What makes the whole thing just even worse is when there is an element of failure in the system. Whether that failure is in prevent, as we've seen in a couple of cases. David Amos today talking about failures in that very same problem as we heard with Southport, or failures in our health system, which is where I think the Nottingham attack story will clearly go, because that is where this multifarious reasons and issues around this, the shortcomings are jaw-dropping that we know so far. In a matter of weeks, said the Prime Minister. Back to your calls. Kevin is in Wiltshire. On that 4-day working week, Kevin, what are you thinking? Hi.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think, to be fair, it could be a great divide between the public and private sector, the opportunity to do 4 days a week for the private sector, because you can basically do 4 10-hour days, free weekends up, do whatever you want, but certainly not the public sector. They get absolutely everything with the pensions and all the work-related things.
Yeah. I mean, there is they keep talking about equality everywhere. Well, where's the equality in the current system?
Well, there isn't none. And if you put it across the board, how many teachers do you think can volunteer to do 5 days a week and keep our kids at school? Yeah. No, they'll all be on the 4.
It's a very good point. Yeah, and I wonder how many of those people, when it comes to 4-day week, will be doing any extra time anywhere. I think that this campaign is largely about people not doing any more work. It's just...
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, if you have the opportunity in your work I'm a builder, so I've got the opportunity to work with the hours I want to work.
Yeah.
And if I want to do 40 days, if I need 40 hours a week, I'll do it in the first 4 days, because you never know what the weather's going to bring on the Friday for certain. So anything else other than that throughout the week is a bonus. If you want to work Saturdays, that's your business. But
yeah, I like it.
Public workers.
Good thinking. Kevin, thank you very much indeed for that. Kevin in Wiltshire on the 4-day working week. It's always interesting when you try to explain as well, especially if you're self-employed, which I've been all my working life, because you're responsible for everything. But when you talk to somebody who's only ever worked in a system where you are employed and all your holidays are paid for, if you're off sick you get paid for that, a few other benefits thrown in, I mean, it's quite extraordinary. I was trying to tell Jeremy Carl's here, by the way.
I only do a 3-day week and I get all my benefits and holidays paid.
Right, I do. That's how. And a jet. Did they cancel the helicopter contract in favour of a jet?
Love Struck, solid creamy milk Valentine's Day chocolate.
Oh, is that an Arrow?
It is an Arrow, yes.
I see.
Why, what did you think it was?
I had no idea. I mean,
do you want to nibble some whilst on air? Do you like a bit of chocolate?
This M&S, isn't it?
Yeah, do you want to nibble a bit?
solid cream milk chocolate love arrow and red decoration.
I don't know what the red decoration is. Anyway, there we go.
I think it's
are
a
you?
heart.
I honestly believe that today is the day at which point I should really just give up.
Do you think so?
The world has gone. I mean, I keep thinking the world's gone mad, and then it just gets madder.
Every day.
What bloody planet does Stella Creasy come from, the Labour MP?
What's she about now?
She sparked fury for demanding illegal migrants be given British citizenship, and she said, and I quote in the House of Commons, do you know this story?
Go on.
We gave it to Paddington Bear. This isn't made up. This is a fact. This is.
I didn't hear the Paddington Bear story.
Stella Creasy said that small boat asylum seekers should get the same welcoming treatment as the cuddly kids character she hit out at her own party's crackdown on them ever gaining UK citizenship, part of the Home Office efforts to deter channel crossings.
Where do these MPs
Border
come from?
officials have been given toughened new guidance to guide the rights of all illegal migrants. Walthamstow MP Ms Creasy said that this would deny those whose asylum claims were granted for integrating into communities with full citizenship, like Paddington Bear. She said that.
The words Paddington Bear.
Paddington Bear came in on a boat and we looked after him. Why can't you treat my brothers from Walthamstow in the same way?
It wasn't some crafty analogy or a nod or a wink. She was probably talking about. She actually said Paddington. Creasy evoked Paddington Bear.
Yes, she did, yes. And if you understand that this government is about or has picked a man to control our borders, and this man's going to work a 4-day week, I don't have a problem with that, from Finland. He's working from home.
It's all right, isn't it? The Finnish man is working. He's not even Finnish, but he lives in Finland. I don't know why he's in Finland.
Do you think he'll get the job finished at all? I mean, the whole thing is embarrassing, isn't it? And if you're Gazan, you can come and live in the UK, but if you come from the United Kingdom, you're absolutely screwed, ladies and gentlemen.
There it is.
I hate to be